The night billionaire Damian Voss lost everything. His ex-wife walked into the hall in a silver dress. 6 months ago, the world believed Selene Vale was gone forever, humiliated, bankrupt, and wiped out by the man who built his empire on her talent. But under the diamond-studded crystal lights of Las Vegas, she's back. Sharp, untouchable, dangerous. And tonight, Selene isn't back to close the chapter on the past. She's back to declare war. Follow this story to the very end. Like and leave a comment about where you're watching from. I want to know how far this story has come. The ballroom smelled like money and lies. Selene Vale stood in the marble corridor outside the Imperial Grand's main hall, her fingers wrapped around a champagne flute she hadn't sipped from. The glass was warm now. She'd been holding it for 20 minutes, watching her own reflection fracture across the mirror-polished walls. Silver dress, sharp shoulders, hair pulled back so tight it hurt. She looked like a weapon. That was the point. Inside, the charity gala roared with laughter and clinking glasses. Las Vegas elite packed the room. Developers, politicians, casino magnates, all of them dressed in $10,000 tuxedos and borrowed jewelry, pretending they gave a damn about homeless youth or clean water or whatever cause was fashionable this season. Selene knew better. She'd spent 5 years married into this world. She knew what these people really cared about: power, status, winning. And tonight she was about to ruin all three for one man. Her phone buzzed. A text from Vivian Laurent. He just arrived, north entrance, alone. Selene's pulse kicked up just once, then steadied. She set the champagne glass on a passing tray and walked toward the ballroom doors. Her heels clicked against marble with the precision of a countdown timer. 6 months of planning. 6 months of rebuilding herself from nothing. 6 months of swallowing rage until it hardened into something colder, sharper, more patient than anger ever could be. The doors opened. She stepped inside. And across the room, through a sea of black suits and glittering gowns, Damian Voss saw her. He froze mid-conversation, champagne glass halfway to his mouth. The woman beside him, some interchangeable brunette with practiced laugh lines, kept talking, oblivious. But Damian wasn't listening anymore. His eyes locked onto Selene like a man watching a ghost walk through a wall. Good. Let him see. Let him remember what he destroyed. Selene moved through the crowd with deliberate slowness, letting the room notice her. Heads turned. Whispers rippled outward. She'd been gone 6 months, vanished so completely that rumors had spread. Bankruptcy, breakdown, maybe worse. Some people thought she'd left the country. Others assumed she'd crawled home to family, broken and forgotten. No one expected her here, especially not looking like this. She reached the bar and ordered a vodka tonic. The bartender, a kid who couldn't be more than 22, fumbled with the bottle. His hand shook slightly when he handed her the glass. Selene smiled, not warmly, just enough to acknowledge his nerves, and turned back toward the room. Damian was moving toward her. He cut through the crowd with the entitled confidence of a man who'd spent his entire life getting what he wanted. Tall, broad-shouldered, silver streaking through his dark hair in a way that made him look distinguished instead of old. He wore a midnight blue tuxedo tailored so perfectly it probably cost more than some people's cars. Everything about him screamed success, control, invincibility. Selene knew better. She'd seen him at 3 a.m, drunk and paranoid, convinced every business deal was a trap. She'd watched him bribe inspectors, falsify documents, cut corners on safety regulations because it saved him 6% on a build. She knew exactly what kind of rot lived underneath all that expensive polish. And soon, everyone else would too. Selene! His voice was carefully neutral when he reached her. Not surprised, not afraid, just controlled, like he'd rehearsed this moment. I didn't expect to see you here. I bet you didn't. She sipped her drink. The vodka burned clean and cold. Damian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Up close, she could see the strain around his eyes, the fine lines that hadn't been there a year ago. Good. Let him age badly. Let him feel every ounce of stress he'd dumped onto her shoulders for 5 years while he took credit for her work. You look, he started. Different? Selene smiled. I am. I was going to say well. Liar. The word landed between them like a blade. Damian's expression flickered, just for a second, before smoothing back into that boardroom neutrality he wore like armor. But she'd seen it, the crack. "We should talk," he said quietly. "Somewhere private." "No." "Selene, I have nothing to say to you, Damian. Not privately, not ever again." His hand moved toward her arm, then stopped midair when she stepped back. Smart. Touch her here, in front of all these people, and she'd make a scene that would end his reputation faster than any lawsuit. "Then why are you here?" His voice dropped lower. "Dangerous now. Why come back to Vegas? Why show up at this event tonight if you don't want to talk?" Selene leaned in, just close enough that her words wouldn't carry beyond the two of them. "Because I wanted you to see me," she said softly. "I wanted you to know I didn't disappear. I didn't break. And I didn't forget." She pulled back and watched his face pale. "Enjoy the evening, Damian." She turned and walked away before he could respond, leaving him standing alone by the bar with his expensive suit and his empty hands and the slow dawning realization that something had shifted beneath his feet. The room felt electric now. Selene moved through it like current through water, smiling at people who'd once snubbed her at Damian's request, nodding at investors who'd watched her marriage collapse and done nothing. She wasn't here to make friends. She was here to be seen, to remind this entire glittering ecosystem that she existed, that she hadn't been erased. Near the silent auction tables, she spotted Vivienne Laurent. The venture capitalist stood alone, examining a painting with the focused intensity of a surgeon evaluating an incision. Tall, elegant, probably mid-50s but refusing to admit it. Sharp black suit, no jewelry except a single platinum ring. Everything about Vivienne screamed precision, control, money that didn't need to announce itself. Selene approached slowly. "Mrs. Laurent." Vivienne glanced over, one eyebrow raised. "Ms. Vale, punctual. I appreciate that. You said to arrive at 9. I said to arrive when Damian did." Vivienne turned back to the painting. "Timing matters. You want him off balance, distracted, wondering what you're doing here. That's when people make mistakes." He looked surprised. "Good. Surprised men are stupid men." Vivienne's smile was razor thin. "Walk with me." They moved through the crowd together, two women who looked like they belonged at different parties. Vivienne commanded space naturally, her presence making people step aside without realizing they were doing it. Selene had studied this woman for weeks after Vivienne's unexpected phone call 6 months ago, the call that had given Selene her first real hope that revenge was possible. Vivienne Laurent didn't invest in anything she didn't believe would succeed, and 3 months ago she'd offered Selene something impossible, a chance to compete for the Aurora District contract, the biggest redevelopment project in Las Vegas history, worth $1.3 billion, the kind of project that could define a career, or destroy one. "Have you finalized your team?" Vivienne asked quietly as they walked. "Yes. Chen signed yesterday. Rodriguez is finishing up his contract in Phoenix, but he'll be here by Tuesday. And I found a structural engineer in Portland, Keiko Tanaka. Brilliant, young, hungry. Can they work together?" "They'll have to." Vivienne glanced at her sidelong. "That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have." Selene stopped near one of the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Strip. Outside, neon burned against darkness. Casinos and hotels stacked like vertical cities, each one screaming for attention. "You asked me to build a team in 3 months. I built one. Whether they gel or kill each other, we'll find out when we start working." "Honest," Vivienne smiled faintly. "I like that. Damian would have lied and told me they were already best friends." "Damian lies about everything." "Yes, he does." Vivienne turned to face her fully now. "Which is why you're going to beat him." The certainty in her voice should have been reassuring. Instead, it made Selene's stomach tighten with something close to fear. She'd spent 6 months preparing for this, working 80-hour weeks in a studio apartment in Phoenix, designing and redesigning the Aurora proposal until her eyes burned and her hands cramped. She knew the project inside out. She knew it was good, maybe even great. But knowing something and doing it were different animals. "The presentation is in 6 weeks, Selene said. "That's not much time." "It's enough. You've already done the hard part." "The hard part?" "You survived him." Vivienne's expression hardened. Most people don't. Damian has a gift for breaking people so thoroughly they never stand back up. But you did. That tells me everything I need to know about whether you can handle this. Selene wanted to believe her. God, she wanted to. But doubt was a living thing inside her chest, whispering that she was insane to think she could compete against Damian Voss. He had connections, resources, a reputation built over 15 years. What did she have? A team of strangers and a stack of blueprints that might be brilliant or might be naive fantasy. Why are you doing this? The question came out before Selene could stop it. Why help me? You could destroy Damian yourself. You have the money, the influence. Why use me? Vivian was quiet for a moment, her gaze distant. 12 years ago, she said finally, Damian pitched me a project, mixed-use development downtown. I almost invested, but something felt wrong, so I dug deeper. Found out the financials were fabricated. The projections were fantasy. He was essentially running a Ponzi scheme with real estate. What did you do? I walked away, and I told other investors what I'd found. Vivian's smile turned cold. Damian has hated me ever since. He spent over a decade trying to shut me out of Vegas development deals, spreading rumors, sabotaging partnerships, making it very clear that anyone who works with me will never work with him. So this is revenge? No. Vivian met her eyes. This is justice. There's a difference. Revenge is emotional. Justice is structural. I want Damian Voss out of this industry not because he wronged me, but because he's dangerous. He builds unsafe structures and bribes his way past inspections. He exploits workers and destroys lives. And sooner or later, someone is going to get hurt. Or killed. Selene's breath caught. You think his buildings are that bad? I know they are. I've had investigators looking into his projects for years. The Meridian Tower? Substandard concrete. The Sapphire residences? Electrical systems that barely passed code, and only because he paid off the inspector. The Valencia complex? Vivian paused. That one scares me. It's a 30-story residential building constructed with so many shortcuts, I'm surprised it's still standing. Horror crept up Selene's spine. She'd known Damian cut corners. She'd seen him falsify documents, rush inspections, pressure contractors to use cheaper materials. But she'd always told herself it was just business. Unethical, yes. Illegal, maybe, but not dangerous. People live in those buildings, she said quietly. Yes, they do. Vivian's voice was flat, which is why this matters. You're not just competing for a contract, Selene. You're exposing a pattern. And if you win, when you win, the industry will take notice. Investors will start asking questions. Inspectors will look harder. And maybe, just maybe, Damian will finally face consequences. The weight of it settled over Selene like concrete. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It wasn't even about proving herself. If Vivian was right, if Damian's buildings were actually unsafe, then walking away wasn't an option. I need access to those investigation files, Selene said. No. Vivian, absolutely not. The venture capitalist tone allowed no argument. If you go after him with that information, he'll sue you for defamation and tie you up in court for years. Worse, he'll claim you're trying to sabotage his reputation out of spite. It'll destroy your credibility before the Aurora presentation even happens. Then what am I supposed to do? Just ignore it? You're supposed to win. Vivian leaned closer. You beat him on Aurora. You prove your design is better. Your team is stronger. Your vision is more valuable. And once you have that contract, once you have legitimacy and standing in this industry, then you can raise questions about his other projects. But not before. Not when you're still fighting for a foothold. It made sense. Cold, calculated sense. But it also felt like complicity, knowing people might be in danger and choosing not to warn them because the timing wasn't right. I hate this, Selene said. Good. You should. Vivian straightened. Now smile. Damian is watching us from across the room, and we need him wondering what we're discussing. Selene forced her lips into something resembling a smile. It felt like breaking glass. She glanced toward the bar, and sure enough, there was Damian, pretending to listen to some real estate attorney while his eyes tracked Selene and Vivian like a predator watching prey. He's scared, Vivian murmured. Look at his posture, shoulders tight, jaw clenched. He knows something's wrong, but he doesn't know what. That's exactly where we want him. What if he finds out about Aurora before the presentation? He will. It's a public contract, but by the time he realizes you're competing, it'll be too late for him to sabotage your proposal. You'll already be in front of the planning commission. And if he comes after me personally? He won't. Not publicly. Vivian's smile sharpened. Damian's smart enough to know that attacking his ex-wife would make him look vindictive. Bad press. Bad optics. No, he'll try to undermine you quietly. Spread doubts. Question your experience. Plant stories about your instability. The word landed like a punch. Instability. That's what Damian had told everyone after she left. That Selene was having a breakdown, couldn't handle the pressure, needed psychiatric help. He'd painted her as fragile, irrational, too emotional to be taken seriously in business. And people had believed him. Let him try, Selene said quietly. Her hands had curled into fists without her realizing it. I'm not the same person I was 6 months ago. No, you're not. Vivian studied her for a long moment. The question is whether you're ready for what comes next. Because once you walk into that presentation, there's no going back. You'll be declaring war in front of the entire Vegas development community, and Damian Voss doesn't lose gracefully. Selene thought about the forged documents that had appeared in her name, the bank account she'd never opened, suddenly drowning in debt, the contracts she'd never signed, tying her to liabilities that didn't exist, the systematic, methodical way Damian had destroyed her financially, legally, socially, not because she'd done anything wrong, but because she'd asked for a divorce, because she'd wanted to leave, because she dared to believe she deserved better than being his invisible ghostwriter, the talent behind his throne, the architect who designed his empire while he collected the applause. I'm ready, she said. Vivian nodded once. Then let's go to war. She walked away, disappearing into the crowd with the ease of someone who'd spent decades navigating rooms full of sharks. Selene stood alone by the window, staring out at the neon skyline. Somewhere out there, maybe in one of those glowing towers, families were sleeping in apartments that might not be safe. Kids doing homework in living rooms with substandard electrical systems. Elderly couples watching television in high-rises built with compromised concrete. All because one man valued profit over people. Her phone buzzed. A message from Marcus Chen, her lead designer. Preliminary renderings done. Want to meet tomorrow? I have ideas. Selene smiled, real this time, not the calculated performance she'd been wearing all night. Tomorrow. 9 a.m. Bring coffee. She turned away from the window and nearly collided with someone. A man, mid-30s, expensive suit, but not quite expensive enough to belong here. He caught her elbow to steady her, then immediately let go. Sorry, he said. Wasn't watching where I was going. It's fine. Selene started to move past him, then paused. Something about his face was familiar. Not someone she knew personally, but someone she'd seen. Recently. Where? You're Selene Vale, he said. Not a question. Yes. I'm James Riley. I worked for Damian. Project manager on the Meridian Tower. Worked. Past tense. What happened? Selene asked, though she already suspected the answer. I raised concerns about the concrete mixture we were using, said it didn't meet specifications. Damian told me to keep my mouth shut, or I'd never work in Vegas again. James smiled bitterly. I kept my mouth shut. Then they fired me anyway. Liability, they said. They needed someone to blame if questions ever came up about the build quality. Selene's pulse quickened. Do you have documentation, emails, inspection reports? Why? His eyes narrowed. You planning something? Maybe. Maybe isn't good enough. Damian Voss destroyed my career. If you're coming after him, I need to know you're serious. Because if you fail, if you try and miss, he'll come after everyone who helped you. And I've already lost everything once. Fair. God, it was fair. Selene looked at this man, this stranger who'd just approached her at a gala with information that could be either explosive or useless, and she had to decide right now whether to trust him, whether to pull him into this war she was waging. The Aurora District, she said quietly. I'm competing for the contract against Damian. James went very still. You're serious? Yes. When's the presentation? 6 weeks. Jesus. He ran a hand through his hair. That's not much time. I know. Does he know you're competing? Not yet, but he will. James studied her for a long moment, weighing something she couldn't read. Then slowly, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. He scribbled something on the back and handed it to her. My personal email. I have files, documentation from Meridian Tower, Sapphire Residences, and Valencia, safety reports that got buried, inspection records that don't match what was actually built, emails where Damian explicitly ordered us to ignore code violations. Selene's hands trembled slightly as she took the card. Why are you giving me this? Because someone needs to stop him before people get hurt. And because he hesitated. I heard what he did to you. The financial stuff, the identity theft, the way he tried to erase you. And I watched it happen and I didn't say anything. That makes me complicit. So maybe this is how I fix that. Damian will come after you if this goes public. Let him. I'm already unemployable in this city. Might as well make it count. He walked away before Selene could respond, leaving her standing alone with a business card that felt like it weighed 10 pounds. She looked down at the email address scrawled in pen, jamesriley.truth@protonmail.com. Her phone buzzed again. This time, an unknown number. We need to talk. Tomorrow, 7 a.m. The coffee shop on Fremont. Come alone. D. Damian. Selene stared at the message for a long time, her mind racing. He wanted to meet. Privately. Early. Before the rest of the city woke up. That meant he was rattled. Desperate, maybe. Trying to figure out what she was planning, what she knew, how much danger he was actually in. She shouldn't go. Nothing good could come from meeting with him alone. Vivian would probably tell her it was a trap, a chance for Damian to manipulate her, or intimidate her, or worse. But there was power in seeing him squirm, in watching him try to charm or threaten his way back into control, in reminding herself exactly why she was doing this, not just for revenge, but for justice, for all the people he'd used and discarded, for every corner he'd cut and every lie he'd told, for the version of herself that had believed in him once, before she learned better. 7 a.m. I'll be there. She sent the message and immediately felt a spike of adrenaline, fear, and anticipation mixing into something that tasted like copper. Tomorrow morning, she'd sit across from the man who destroyed her life and tried to erase her from existence. And she'd smile. And she'd lie. And she'd walk away with more information than she'd arrived with. Because that's what survivors did. They adapted, they learned, and they never, ever gave up. Selene dropped her phone back into her clutch and turned toward the exit. She'd been at the gala for barely an hour, but she'd accomplished what she came for. Damian knew she was back. The whispers had started. And tomorrow morning, the real game would begin. She made it halfway across the ballroom when she heard her name. Selene. She turned. Damian stood 3 feet away, closer than he'd been all night. His expression was carefully blank, but his eyes were burning with something that looked almost like panic. Don't do this, he said quietly, low enough that no one else could hear. Whatever you're planning, don't. I'm not planning anything. Bullshit. You didn't show up here in a silver dress in Vivian Laurent's company by accident. You're making a move. I can feel it. Selene smiled, slow, deliberate. Then I guess you should have thought about that before you destroyed me. She walked away, leaving him standing alone in a room full of people who didn't matter, holding champagne that had gone warm, wearing a suit that suddenly felt too tight. And somewhere deep in her chest, underneath all the rage and determination and carefully controlled fear, Selene felt something she hadn't felt in 6 months. Hope. The valet brought her car around, a used Honda Civic she'd bought cash in Phoenix, nothing like the luxury vehicles she'd driven when she was married. She tipped him $5 and drove north through the Strip, past casinos blazing with light and tourists stumbling drunk between hotels. Her apartment was in Henderson, 20 minutes from the Strip, in a complex that rented by the week to people who couldn't afford security deposits. The kind of place where neighbors didn't make eye contact and sirens were background noise. Selene parked in the unlit lot and carried her heels up 2 flights of exterior stairs, her dress catching on the rough concrete. Inside, the apartment was exactly as she'd left it, 1 room with a kitchenette, a mattress on the floor, and an entire wall covered in blueprints, sketches, and photographs. The Aurora District proposal spread across the space like a living organism, evolving daily as she and her team refined the design. Selene dropped her clutch on the counter and stood in the center of the room, staring at her work. Sustainable housing integrated with public art spaces. Rooftop gardens that would turn steel towers into vertical forests. Community performance venues woven directly into the architecture. Affordable artist housing next to luxury residences, creating actual diversity instead of the manufactured kind developers loved to talk about but never delivered. It was ambitious, maybe too ambitious, but it was also real. Human. The kind of architecture that could change lives instead of just extracting profit from them. And if she won, if she actually pulled this off, it would prove something she'd spent 5 years doubting, that she was the visionary, that Damian had always been just the salesman. Her phone buzzed one more time. Another unknown number. Good luck tomorrow. You're going to need it. No name, no signature. But Selene didn't need one to know who'd sent it. She deleted the message and turned off her phone. Tomorrow morning at 7, she'd sit across from Damian Voss and play the most dangerous game of her life. But tonight? Tonight she was going to sleep, because survivors needed rest, and wars weren't won on empty tanks. She pulled off the silver dress and left it pooled on the floor like shed skin. Then she lay down on the mattress and stared at the ceiling, counting her heartbeats until they slowed from sprinting to something close to normal. Somewhere across the city, Damian was probably pacing his penthouse, trying to figure out what she knew. Let him wonder. Let him worry. Let him spend all night chasing ghosts while she rested up for battle. Selene closed her eyes, and for the first time in 6 months, when she finally slept, she didn't dream of drowning. She dreamed of building something that would last. The coffee shop on Fremont smelled like burnt espresso and regret. Selene arrived at 6:47 a.m., 13 minutes early, because showing up on time meant giving Damian the satisfaction of thinking she'd waited for him. The place was nearly empty, just a tired barista wiping down counters and 2 construction workers hunched over breakfast burritos at a corner table. She ordered black coffee, found a booth near the back window, and waited. Her hands were steady. That surprised her. She'd expected nerves, maybe nausea, the physical memory of 5 years spent walking on eggshells around a man who could turn charming to cruel in the space between heartbeats. But sitting there in jeans and a plain gray sweater, hair loose around her shoulders, she felt nothing except a cold, watchful calm. 7 o'clock came and went. 7:05, 7:10. Classic Damian. Make her wait. Establish control through absence. Remind her that his time was more valuable than hers. Selene sipped her coffee and stared out the window at Fremont Street, waking up. Neon signs flickering off as daylight bleached the sky. Homeless people shuffling toward shelters. Delivery trucks unloading supplies to casinos that never closed. Vegas looked different in the morning. Exhausted. Honest in a way it never was after dark. At 7:16, Damian walked in. He looked terrible. The expensive confidence he'd worn at the gala had frayed at the edges. Wrinkled Oxford shirt, no tie, stubble darkening his jaw like he'd forgotten to shave. His eyes were bloodshot. Either he'd been drinking or he hadn't slept. Maybe both. Good. He slid into the booth across from her without ordering anything. "Thanks for coming," he said. "You asked." "I wasn't sure you would." Neither was I. Silence stretched between them, thick and uncomfortable. Damian's fingers drummed against the tabletop, nervous energy he couldn't quite hide. Selene watched him the way she'd learned to watch rattlesnakes in the desert, very still, very alert, ready to move the second he struck. "You look different," he said finally. "You said that already, last night." "I mean it. You look—" He struggled for the word. "Harder." "Good." "That's not a compliment." "I didn't take it as one." Selene set her coffee down. "Why am I here, Damian?" "Because we need to talk." "About what?" "About whatever the hell you're planning with Vivian Laurent." There it was. The real reason. Not reconciliation or apology or any pretense of civility. Just fear dressed up as confrontation. "I'm not planning anything," Selene said. "Bullshit. You show up at the gala after 6 months of radio silence, you're wearing a dress that probably costs more than your rent, and you're having private conversations with the one woman in Vegas who hates me more than you do. That's not coincidence. Maybe I just wanted to remind people I exist." "No." Damian leaned forward. You wanted to remind me. You wanted me to see you, to know you're back. Why? Selene smiled, not warmly, just enough to let him see that she enjoyed his paranoia. Maybe I missed Vegas. Try again. Maybe I got tired of running. You weren't running. You were hiding. His voice dropped lower, meaner. You left because you couldn't handle the pressure, because you had a breakdown and needed to get your head straight. That's what everyone thinks. That's what I told them. I know what you told them. The words came out flat, emotionless. You told them I was unstable, irrational, too fragile for the industry. You painted me as crazy so no one would believe me if I ever tried to come back. And yet, here you are. Here I am. Damian stared at her for a long moment, his jaw working like he was chewing through possible responses, trying to find the one that would crack her open. I didn't want it to go this way, he said finally. The divorce. The aftermath. I didn't want to hurt you, Selene, but you backed me into a corner. You threatened to expose things that would have destroyed everything I built. What was I supposed to do? The audacity of it hit her like a slap. He was rewriting history right in front of her, turning himself into the victim, the man forced to defend himself against a vindictive wife. It was the same script he'd sold to investors, lawyers, anyone who'd listen. And it had worked. People had believed him because Damian Voss was successful, and Selene Vale was just the quiet woman who'd stood beside him at parties. I never threatened to expose anything, she said quietly. I asked for a divorce. That's it. No demands, no blackmail. I just wanted out. You were going to take half. That's how divorce works. Half of something you didn't build. And there it was. The truth he'd never actually said during their marriage, but had implied in 1,000 small cruelties. He didn't think she'd earned anything. Didn't believe her designs, her vision, her talent had contributed to his success. In Damian's version of reality, he was the genius, and she was just the assistant who'd gotten lucky by association. I built more than you ever did, Selene said. I designed the Meridian Tower, the Sapphire Residences, Valencia. Every major project you've completed in the last 5 years started with my blueprints, my ideas, my vision. You just sold them. And you think that makes you special? Every architect has designers. That's how the industry works. I took your sketches and turned them into reality. I got the funding. I managed the contractors. I navigated the politics. You drew pretty pictures. I built empires. The dismissal in his voice was so casual it almost felt rehearsed. Like he'd practiced this speech, refined it until it sounded reasonable instead of monstrous. Selene's hands curled into fists beneath the table. You forged documents in my name, she said. You opened credit cards using my identity. You buried me in debt I never incurred and destroyed my credit so thoroughly I couldn't rent an apartment. That's not building an empire, Damian. That's fraud. Prove it. 2 words, delivered with absolute confidence. Because he knew she couldn't. Not easily. The forged documents had been careful, professional, buried under layers of legitimate paperwork that would take lawyers years to unravel. By the time she proved anything, her reputation would be ruined, her credibility shredded, her name permanently associated with financial irresponsibility, regardless of the truth. I don't need to prove it, Selene said. I just need to survive it. And I did. Something flickered across Damian's face. Surprise, maybe? Or the first cold edge of real fear. What does that mean? It means I'm done being afraid of you. She stood up. The conversation was over. She'd learned what she came to learn. Damian was rattled but not broken, threatened but still arrogant, and absolutely convinced he could intimidate her back into silence. He was wrong. Selene. His hand shot across the table, catching her wrist. Not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to stop her. Whatever you're planning, don't. I'm serious. You can't win against me. I have resources you can't imagine, connections, power. If you try to come after me, I will destroy you so completely you'll wish you'd stayed disappeared. She looked down at his hand on her wrist, then back up at his face. Let go. Not until you listen. Let go. Her voice didn't rise, but something in it made him release her immediately, his hand jerking back like he'd touched something hot. Selene leaned down, close enough that her next words wouldn't carry beyond the booth. I already lived through you destroying me once, she said softly. It didn't kill me. And every day I woke up still breathing was a day I got stronger. So go ahead, Damian, try it again. See what happens when you come after someone who has nothing left to lose. She walked out before he could respond, leaving him sitting alone in a booth with cold coffee and the slow dawning realization that the woman he'd married, the quiet, accommodating architect who'd spent 5 years making herself smaller so he could feel bigger, didn't exist anymore. Outside, Celine's hands started shaking. She made it to her car before the adrenaline dump hit, her whole body trembling like she'd just run a marathon. She gripped the steering wheel hard, breathing through her nose until the shaking subsided from earthquake to tremor. She'd done it, faced him, held her ground, walked away. And she'd seen something in his eyes that made the whole terrifying encounter worth it. Damian Voss was afraid of her. Her phone buzzed. Marcus Chen, studio, now. We have a problem. Celine's stomach dropped. She checked the time, 7:34 a.m. Whatever this was, it couldn't wait until their scheduled 9 o'clock meeting. She drove to the studio space she'd rented in an old converted warehouse downtown. 20-minute drive through morning traffic, her mind racing through possibilities. Budget crisis. Design flaw. Someone quit. Someone got arrested. She pulled into the lot and saw Rodriguez's truck already there, Keiko's sedan, Marcus's motorcycle, the whole team 90 minutes early. That was bad. She climbed the stairs to the second-floor studio and pushed through the door to find all three of them standing around the main work table, staring at something she couldn't see yet. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. What happened? Selene said. Marcus looked up. His face was carefully blank in the way that meant he was furious but trying to control it. Tell her, he said, looking at Rodriguez. Carlos Rodriguez was a contractor's contractor, 50 years old, built like a refrigerator, with hands that looked like they could crush concrete. He'd worked with Selene on 2 projects in Phoenix, and she'd begged him to come to Vegas because he was the best project manager she'd ever met. Honest, thorough, incapable of cutting corners. Right now he looked like he wanted to murder someone. I got a call this morning, Rodriguez said, his voice tight. 6 a.m. from the union rep. What union? Selene asked. My union, the one I've been a member of for 28 years. He rubbed his face. Someone filed a complaint against me. Anonymous. Claiming I falsified safety reports on the Phoenix projects, saying I took kickbacks from suppliers, that I endangered workers. That's insane. None of that's true. I know it's not true. You know it's not true. But the union doesn't know that. They're opening an investigation, which means I can't work on Aurora until it's resolved. Which means... He stopped, jaw clenched so hard Selene could hear his teeth grinding. Which means we just lost our project manager 6 weeks before the biggest presentation of your career. The room tilted slightly. Selene grabbed the edge of the work table to steady herself. How long will the investigation take? She asked. Weeks, maybe months. They're treating it seriously because the complaint included documentation, fake documentation obviously, but it looks real enough that they have to check it out. Who filed it? Anonymous. But they all knew. There was only one person who'd benefit from sabotaging Selene's team right now. Only one person who knew exactly how to weaponize bureaucracy against them. Damian, Marcus said flatly. Rodriguez nodded. Has to be. Nobody else even knows I'm working on Aurora. We haven't announced the team publicly, haven't filed permits. This is targeted, professional. Selene's mind raced. Losing Rodriguez was catastrophic. He knew construction management inside and out. He could translate her architectural vision into concrete reality, coordinate subcontractors, manage budgets, navigate the 1,000 small crises that erupted during any major build. Without him, they were flying blind. Can you fight it? She asked. Yeah, and I will, but not fast enough to help you with Aurora. Rodriguez looked genuinely pained. I'm sorry, Selene. I know you needed me. But if I work on this project while under investigation, it'll give Damian ammunition to claim the whole team is corrupt. It'll undermine everything you're trying to build. He was right. God, he was right. Having Rodriguez on the team while he was under ethics investigation would be suicide. The Planning Commission would take one look at that and assume Selene was just as crooked as Damian had claimed. So what do we do? Keiko asked. She was the youngest member of the team, 28, brilliant, and perpetually anxious in the way of people who'd grown up being told they weren't good enough. Can we find another project manager? In 6 weeks? Marcus shook his head. No, not anyone good. And definitely not anyone willing to attach their name to a project competing against Damian Voss. Then we do it ourselves, Selene said. Three faces turned toward her. What? Marcus said. We manage the project ourselves. Between the three of us, we have enough combined experience. Marcus, you've managed small commercial builds. Keiko, you've done structural oversight. I've coordinated residential projects. It's not ideal, but it's possible. It's insane, Marcus said. Do you have any idea how much work goes into managing a project this size? We're talking permits, contractors, suppliers, union negotiations, safety compliance, budget oversight, and that's before we even break ground. Right now, we don't have to worry about construction. We just have to win the contract. But if we're trying to manage project logistics while also perfecting our presentation, we're going to burn out before we make it to the finish line. So we'll burn out. Celine's voice was harder than she'd intended. We'll work 18-hour days. We'll drink coffee until our hearts explode. We'll do whatever it takes because walking away isn't an option. Maybe it should be. The room went silent. Marcus hadn't quite looked at her when he said it, his eyes fixed somewhere past her left shoulder. But the words hung there anyway, impossible to ignore. Say that again, Selene said quietly. I said maybe walking away should be an option. Marcus finally met her eyes. Look, I believe in this project. I think Aurora could be incredible, but we're barely holding this together as it is. Rodriguez was the glue. Without him, we're just three people with a dream and not enough resources. And if Damian's already sabotaging us, if he's willing to file false ethics complaints and destroy careers, what's he going to do when we actually present? What happens when we walk into that chamber and he realizes we're serious? Then we fight, Selene said. With what? We don't have his connections. We don't have his money. We don't have a safety net. If this fails, we're done. All of us. You think anyone's going to hire the team that tried to take down Damian Voss and lost? So you want to quit. I want to be realistic. Realistic is just another word for defeated. No. Realistic is understanding when you're outmatched. Marcus's voice rose. I'm not saying Aurora's a bad idea. I'm saying maybe this isn't the right time. Maybe we need to build up our reputation first, get some smaller wins under our belt, establish credibility. Then come back and take a shot at something this big. We don't have time for that, Selene said. Aurora's happening now. The RFP closes in 6 weeks. If we don't compete now, someone else wins the contract. Someone who will probably build exactly the kind of soulless luxury development this city already has too many of. Better than building nothing because we crashed and burned. Keiko raised her hand slightly like a student asking permission to speak. Can I say something? Go ahead, Selene said. Marcus might be right. Keiko's voice was small but steady. Not about giving up, but about being realistic. I've been running numbers on the structural engineering. The suspended rooftop gardens you want? The ones that would make this project actually special? They're expensive, really expensive. And we'd need custom materials, specialized contractors, none of which we've budgeted for. So we adjust the budget, Selene said. With what money? We're already maxed out. Vivian gave us seed funding, but it's barely enough to cover the presentation materials. If we win the contract, sure, we'll have real capital. But until then, we're running on fumes. Then we find investors. Who's going to invest in a team with no track record going up against Damian Voss? It was a fair question. A brutal question. The kind of question Selene didn't have a good answer for because the truth was simple. No one was going to invest in them. They were too risky, too unknown, too obviously outmatched. Then we simplify the design, she said. No. Marcus's voice was sharp. If we simplify, we lose. The whole reason Aurora matters is because it's ambitious, it's different, it's everything Damian's cookie-cutter luxury bullshit isn't. The moment we start cutting corners to make the budget work, we become just another developer playing it safe. So what are you saying? We keep the design, but we can't afford to build it? I'm saying we're stuck. Silence crashed down over the studio. Selene looked around at her team, these three people she'd assembled with such hope 6 months ago, convinced they could build something that mattered. Now they looked tired, uncertain, like they were already mourning something that hadn't died yet. I need coffee, Rodriguez said abruptly. Anyone else? I'll come with you, Keiko said. They left, the door closing behind them with a soft click that felt louder than it should have. Marcus and Selene stood on opposite sides of the work table, the Aurora blueprint spread between them like a map of a country that might not exist. You think I'm an idiot, Selene said. No, I think you're desperate. Marcus softened slightly. Look, I get it. Damian destroyed you. You want revenge. You want to prove you're more than his shadow. That's understandable. But revenge isn't a business plan, and proving a point isn't worth ruining all our careers. This isn't about revenge. Then what is it about? It's about people living in buildings that aren't safe. It's about an industry that rewards greed and punishes integrity. It's about showing that there's another way to build things, one that actually cares about human beings instead of just profit margins. That's a nice speech. But speeches don't pay mortgages, and idealism doesn't protect us when Damian comes after us with everything he has. Selene's hands were shaking again. Not from fear this time. From rage. You want to walk away? She said. Fine. Walk. I won't stop you. But don't pretend it's because you're being realistic. It's because you're scared. And you know what? That's fine. You should be scared. I'm terrified. But I'm doing it anyway because the alternative is living the rest of my life knowing I had a chance to fight back, and I chose safety instead. Marcus stared at her for a long moment. You really think we can win? No. The honesty surprised her. I think we'll probably fail. I think Damian has too many advantages, and we're too inexperienced and too broke and too desperate. But I also think failing while trying matters more than never trying at all. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Probably. And you're not going to change your mind. No. Marcus picked up a pencil and started sketching something on the margin of one of the blueprints. His hand moved quickly, confident, the way it did when he was working through a problem. The rooftop gardens, he said. What if instead of building them as complete structural additions, we integrate them into the existing load-bearing systems? Use the building's own framework to support them. It'd be harder to engineer, but it would cut costs by maybe 30%. Selene moved around the table to look at what he was drawing. The weight distribution would be tricky, she said. Yeah, but possible. Keiko could figure it out. She's smarter than all of us combined. You're staying. I'm an idiot. Marcus looked up at her. But so are you, so I guess we'll be idiots together. The door opened. Rodriguez and Keiko came back carrying coffee and paper cups. They stopped when they saw Selene and Marcus bent over the blueprints, sketching modifications. Are we doing this? Keiko asked. We're doing this, Selene said. Without me, Rodriguez added quietly. But I'll consult unofficially, answer questions, point you toward good subcontractors. I can't be on the team publicly, but I can help behind the scenes. Damian will find out. Let him. I'm already under investigation. What's he going to do? Investigate me twice? Rodriguez smiled grimly. Besides, I've got 28 years in this industry. 28 years of contacts and favors and people who owe me. If you need something, I'll make calls. Quietly. Selene felt something loosen in her chest. Not quite hope, but close enough. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We still might crash and burn. But we'll crash honestly, Marcus said. That counts for something. They worked through the morning and into the afternoon, redesigning Aurora's most expensive elements, finding ways to maintain the vision while cutting costs. It was brutal, exhausting work. Every compromise felt like a small defeat, every budget adjustment a betrayal of the original dream. But slowly, impossibly, a new version of Aurora emerged. Smaller in scope, but sharper in focus. The rooftop gardens integrated structurally instead of added. The public art spaces concentrated into a central gallery instead of scattered throughout. The affordable housing reduced from 20% of units to 15%, then grudgingly back up to 18% after Selene threatened to walk away from the whole project. By 6 p.m., they had something they could actually present. Not perfect, not the pure vision Selene had started with, but real, buildable, possible. I need food, Keiko announced. Real food, not coffee. There's a taco place around the corner, Marcus said. Cash only. Possibly a front for something illegal, but the carnitas are incredible. They locked up the studio and walked together through downtown Vegas as the sun dropped toward the horizon and neon started blinking to life. The taco place was exactly as advertised, grimy, cramped, and serving food that tasted like someone's grandmother had been cooking all day, with ingredients that cost less than their love. Selene sat in a plastic chair on the sidewalk, eating carnitas tacos and listening to her team argue about load-bearing calculations and supplier options, and whether the Planning Commission would actually care about sustainable architecture or just pretend to care while approving whatever made the most money. This was her empire now, not penthouses and galas and designer clothes, 4 people and a dream and tacos on a sidewalk. She'd never been happier. Her phone buzzed. Vivienne Laurent. Need to see you. Tonight. Important. Selene showed the message to Marcus. Go, he said. We'll keep working on the structural modifications. Text if you need backup. Backup? I don't trust Vivienne. Marcus shrugged. She's helping you, but she's not your friend. Remember that. Selene drove to Vivienne's office in Summerlin, a gleaming high-rise that looked like it had been designed by someone who thought glass and steel were the only acceptable building materials. The receptionist directed her to the top floor, where Vivienne waited in a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire valley. Sit, Vivienne said without preamble. Selene sat. Damian filed an ethics complaint against your project manager. I know. Rodriguez told me this morning. That's not the only thing he filed. Vivienne slid a manila folder across the desk. He's also filed 3 different challenges to the Aurora RFP process. Claims the selection criteria are biased, that the timeline is too short, that the Planning Commission has a conflict of interest. Selene opened the folder. Legal documents, dense with text, each one designed to delay or derail the Aurora project entirely. Can he do this? She asked. He's doing it. Whether it'll work is another question. I've got lawyers reviewing everything. But here's what you need to understand. Damian isn't trying to win through legitimate competition anymore. He's trying to make sure no one else can compete. If he can't have Aurora, he'll burn the whole project to the ground before letting you take it. So what do? You prepare for war. Vivienne leaned back in her chair. The Planning Commission meets in 4 weeks. They're going to hear Damian's challenges first, which means before you even get to present Aurora, you'll have to defend why you deserve the right to compete. He's going to paint you as inexperienced, vindictive, potentially unstable, and he's going to have lawyers and documentation to back it up. None of which is true. Truth doesn't matter. Perception matters. Vivienne's expression was cold. This is how powerful men maintain power. They don't fight fair. They fight to win. And right now, Damian Voss is fighting to make sure you never get a chance to prove yourself. Selene felt something harden inside her chest. Not anger anymore. Something colder, more deliberate. Then I'll fight the same way. Good. Vivienne smiled thinly. Because I have something that might help. She pulled out another folder, this one thicker, with tabs and highlighted sections. James Riley, Vivienne said. The project manager you met at the gala. He came to me yesterday with documentation from the Meridian Tower build. Safety reports that were falsified. Inspection records that don't match what was actually constructed. Emails where Damian explicitly ordered code violations. Selene's pulse quickened. Why would Riley give this to you? Because I offered him immunity. If he testifies about what he saw, I'll make sure he's protected. New job. Legal representation if Damian retaliates. A clean start somewhere Damian's reach doesn't extend. And in exchange? In exchange, you get evidence that Damian Voss is a fraud, that his buildings aren't just unethical, they're dangerous. Vivienne pushed the folder toward Selene. You take this to the Planning Commission. You present Aurora. And then, right when Damian thinks he's safe, you hit him with proof that everything he's built is compromised. Selene stared at the folder like it was a live grenade. If I do this, he'll come after me with everything. He's already coming after you with everything. This just gives you weapons to fight back. What about Riley? If I use this information and it goes public, Damian will know who provided it. Riley knows the risks. He's willing to take them. Why? Because guilt is a powerful motivator. And because he's tired of watching people profit from hurting others. Vivienne stood, walking to the window. 20 years ago, I watched my father get destroyed by developers who cut corners and bribed inspectors. They built a residential complex in Henderson with faulty electrical systems. 3 families died in a fire. My father was the electrician who'd raised concerns and got fired for it. The developers blamed him, ruined his reputation. He never worked again. Vivian's reflection in the glass was perfectly still. 6 months later, he killed himself. The words hung in the air like smoke. I'm sorry, Selene said quietly. Don't be sorry. Be effective. Vivian turned back to face her. That's why I do this. Not for revenge. For accountability. Because men like Damian Voss need to face consequences, or they'll keep destroying lives. And right now, you're the only person positioned to make that happen. Selene picked up the folder. It felt heavier than paper should. If I use this, she said slowly, I'm not just competing for a contract anymore. I'm ending his career. Yes. People will call it a vendetta. They'll say I'm a bitter ex-wife who couldn't move on. Probably. And if I'm wrong, if this information isn't as damning as it looks, I'll lose all credibility. The Planning Commission will throw out my proposal, and I'll never work in this city again. That's true. Vivian's expression didn't change. So you need to decide right now. Are you willing to risk everything on the chance that exposing Damian might actually matter? Or are you going to play it safe, present a nice proposal, and hope Aurora's good enough to win on its own merits? Selene thought about families living in the Meridian Tower, about children sleeping in bedrooms with walls made from substandard concrete, about electrical systems that barely passed inspection because Damian had bribed someone to sign off on work that should have failed, about the woman she used to be, the one who'd known something was wrong but told herself it wasn't her problem, wasn't her responsibility, was just how business worked. She'd spent 6 months becoming someone different, someone who couldn't look away anymore. I'll do it, she said. Vivian smiled, genuine this time, not the calculated expression she wore like armor. Then let's burn his empire to the ground. Selene drove back to Henderson with the folder on her passenger seat, feeling like she was transporting nuclear material. Every stoplight felt too long. Every car that got too close felt like a threat. By the time she reached her apartment, her hands were cramping from gripping the steering wheel. Inside, she spread the documents across her floor, next to the Aurora blueprints that already covered every available surface. 2 separate wars mapped out in paper and ink. The Meridian Tower safety reports were damning. Concrete mixture that didn't meet specifications. Rebar spacing that violated code. Inspection dates that didn't match construction timelines. And through it all, emails from Damian, make it work, find a way. I don't care how. He'd known. Every corner cut, every regulation violated, every family put at risk, he'd known, and he'd ordered it anyway. Selene sat cross-legged on her apartment floor, surrounded by evidence of betrayal so vast it made her original rage seem quaint. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This wasn't even about Aurora. This was about stopping a man who valued profit over human life. And if that meant destroying herself in the process, if it meant becoming the villain in someone else's story, the bitter ex-wife who couldn't let go, the woman who chose vengeance over moving on, then so be it. Some fights were worth losing everything for. Her phone lit up. Unknown number. Again. Last chance to walk away. After tomorrow, I won't be nice anymore. Selene stared at the message for a long moment. Then she typed back, I was never counting on you being nice. She hit send. And somewhere across the city, in a penthouse she used to call home, Damian Voss received a message that told him everything he needed to know. Selene Vale wasn't backing down. She was declaring war. And there was no path back from this. Only forward, through fire, to whatever waited on the other side. The Planning Commission chamber looked like a courtroom designed by someone who'd never seen justice work. Selene sat in the front row, her team flanking her like soldiers preparing for battle. Marcus on her left, Keiko on her right, both of them dressed in their cleanest clothes, which still looked shabby compared to the tailored suits filling the rest of the room. Behind them, maybe 30 people scattered across wooden benches. Journalists, industry observers, a few curious developers who'd heard rumors that something interesting was about to happen. And in the back corner, alone, Damian Voss. He wore charcoal gray today, expensive but understated, the kind of suit that whispered power instead of screaming it. His face was blank, almost bored, like he'd already won and was just here to watch the formalities play out. But Selene could see the tension in his shoulders, The way his jaw worked constantly, like he was chewing through calculations. He knew something was coming. He just didn't know what. The 7 planning commissioners sat behind an elevated desk at the front of the room. 5 men, 2 women, all of them over 50 and looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. The chairperson, a silver-haired man named Gerald Hutchins, rapped his gavel twice. "We'll begin with preliminary motions," Hutchins said, his voice carrying the practiced monotone of someone who'd run 1,000 meetings exactly like this one. Mr. Voss has filed 3 separate challenges to the Aurora District RFP process. We'll hear those first, then move to presentations if the challenges are denied. Damian's lawyer stood, a woman in her 40s with the predatory elegance of a shark in a pencil skirt. Her name was Patricia something. Selene couldn't remember, didn't care. She carried a leather folder and moved to the podium with the confidence of someone who'd never lost an argument she cared about. "Commissioners," Patricia began, "my client has identified serious irregularities in the Aurora RFP process that warrant immediate suspension of proceedings." She opened the folder and began reading. Bias in the selection criteria, insufficient review period, conflict of interest involving one of the commissioners who'd previously worked with Vivienne Laurent, technical violations of procurement statutes. On and on, each accusation delivered with the clinical precision of a surgeon cutting away at legitimacy. Selene felt Keiko's hand find hers under the table, squeezing tight. After 15 minutes, Patricia finished. "Therefore," she concluded, "we respectfully request that the Commission suspend the Aurora RFP pending a full audit of the selection process. Any presentations held before such an audit would be fundamentally tainted and should be considered void." She sat down. Hutchins looked tired. "Miss Laurent, you're listed as the project sponsor. Would you like to respond?" Vivienne stood from the 3rd row, immaculate in navy blue, her expression revealing nothing. "The accusations are without merit," she said simply. "Mr. Voss is attempting to delay a process he knows he cannot win fairly. Every element of the Aurora RFP was reviewed by independent counsel and found to be in full compliance with procurement regulations. Commissioner Morrison's previous professional relationship with my firm ended 8 years ago and involved a completely unrelated project. There is no conflict of interest." "That's your opinion," Patricia shot back. "It's also the opinion of 3 separate law firms who reviewed the RFP documentation." Vivienne's voice could have cut glass. "Which Mr. Voss knows because he hired 2 of those firms to find problems, and they couldn't. This is a delay tactic, nothing more." Hutchins looked at his fellow commissioners. They huddled briefly, whispering among themselves like students cheating on a test. Finally, Hutchins straightened. "The challenges are denied. The RFP process will proceed as scheduled. We'll hear presentations from all qualified applicants." He checked his notes. "Mr. Voss, you're first." Damian stood and walked to the front of the room with the easy confidence of someone who'd done this 100 times before. He didn't use notes, didn't need them. He'd been pitching developments to planning commissions since before Selene met him. "Good morning," he began, flashing that smile that had charmed investors out of millions. "I'm here to talk about the future of downtown Las Vegas, about building something that doesn't just house people, but elevates them. The Aurora District represents an unprecedented opportunity to reshape our city's skyline and reputation." He spoke for 20 minutes. Beautiful renderings appeared on the screen behind him, luxury towers glittering like jewels, retail spaces designed to attract high-end brands, public plazas that looked like they'd been airlifted from Dubai. Everything was sleek, expensive, aspirational. The kind of development that would photograph well and generate tax revenue and make city officials feel like they had accomplished something meaningful. It was also soulless, completely, utterly empty of anything resembling humanity. Selene had designed half those buildings back when she thought Damian's vision matched hers. Now, seeing them presented as his original work, she felt physically sick. "In conclusion," Damian said, "my firm has the experience, resources, and proven track record to deliver Aurora on time and on budget. We've completed 15 major projects in Las Vegas over the past decade, totaling over $3 billion in development. We understand this city. We know how to build here. And we're ready to break ground the moment you give us approval." He sat down to polite applause. Hutchins checked his list again. "Next, we have Vale Architecture. Ms. Vale, you're up." Selene stood. Her legs felt disconnected from her body, like she was watching herself move through water. She'd practiced this presentation 50 times, had memorized every word, every transition, every response to potential questions. But standing in front of 7 board commissioners with Damian watching from the back row, every prepared word evaporated from her brain. She made it to the podium, set down her notes, looked up at the faces staring back at her with expressions ranging from mild interest to open skepticism. "My name is Selene Vale," she said, and was grateful her voice didn't shake. "And I'm here to talk about what Aurora could be if we stopped thinking about buildings as investments and started thinking about them as communities." Marcus triggered the first slide. Instead of luxury renderings, the screen showed a photograph of a grandmother sitting on a crumbling apartment stoop in downtown Vegas, surrounded by children playing in a parking lot because there was nowhere else safe to go. "This is 3 blocks from where Aurora will be built," Selene continued. "This is the neighborhood we're talking about transforming. And transformation shouldn't mean displacement. It shouldn't mean pricing out the people who've lived here for decades so we can fill the space with luxury condos that stay empty half the year." She clicked to the next slide. Aurora's design emerged, not rendered in glossy perfection, but sketched in honest lines that showed its bones, its structure, its intention. "We're proposing mixed-income housing integrated into every building, rooftop gardens that provide green space and reduce urban heat, public art galleries managed by local artists, performance spaces designed for community gatherings, not private events. This isn't about building monuments to wealth. It's about building places where people actually want to live." She talked for 20 minutes, walking the commissioners through every design choice, every budget decision, every compromise they'd made to keep the project financially viable while maintaining its soul. Marcus and Keiko chimed in with technical details about structural engineering and sustainable materials and construction timelines. It was raw, unpolished, nothing like Damian's slick presentation, but it was real. When Selene finished, the room was quiet. Not the polite silence of people waiting to applaud, but the heavy silence of people genuinely thinking. Then Commissioner Morrison, the one Damian's lawyer had tried to disqualify, leaned forward. "Ms. Vale, this is ambitious. Some might say unrealistic. How do you plan to manage a project of this scale with essentially no track record?" "By working harder than anyone else," Selene said. "By caring more. By remembering that every unit we build will be someone's home, not just a line item on a profit statement." "That's very idealistic. But idealism doesn't pour concrete." "No. But integrity does. And I can promise you this. Every building we construct will exceed code requirements. Every inspection will be transparent. Every dollar will be accounted for. Because we're not here to make a quick profit. We're here to build something that lasts." She saw Damian shift in the back row. A subtle movement, barely noticeable, but Selene had spent 5 years learning to read his body language. That was his tell, the microscopic flinch he made when something threatened him. Good. Hutchins looked at his fellow commissioners. "Any other questions for Ms. Vale?" Silence. "Then we'll—" "Actually," Selene interrupted, "I have something else to present, evidence that the commission should consider before making a decision." Damian went very still. "What kind of evidence?" Hutchins asked. Selene pulled the manila folder from her bag. The one Vivian had given her. The one containing proof that Damian Voss was a fraud. Evidence that Mr. Voss's previous projects were constructed using substandard materials and falsified safety inspections. Evidence that families are currently living in buildings that may not be structurally sound. Evidence that giving him the Aurora contract would be allowing someone with a pattern of criminal negligence to build even more unsafe housing. The room exploded. Journalists lunged for their phones. Commissioners sat up straight. Damian's lawyer shot to her feet, shouting objections. And Damian himself stood slowly, his face a mask of cold fury. "This is outrageous," Patricia yelled. "Ms. Vale is making unsubstantiated accusations based on what? Hearsay from a disgruntled former employee? This is character assassination, not evidence." "Then let's examine the evidence," Selene said, her voice cutting through the chaos. She opened the folder and pulled out the first document. "These are inspection reports from the Meridian Tower build. Official documents showing that concrete testing was completed and approved, except the dates don't match construction timelines. The inspections were supposedly conducted 3 weeks before the concrete was even poured." She held up another document. Here are emails from Mr. Voss explicitly ordering his project manager to use cheaper materials than specified in the original plans. Find a way to cut costs, he wrote. I don't care how. Those documents are stolen, Damian said, his voice deadly quiet. Obtained illegally by someone with an axe to grind. They're not stolen. They were provided by a whistleblower who's willing to testify under oath. A whistleblower with a grudge. James Riley was fired for incompetence. Now he's trying to rewrite history to cover his own failures. Then let's put him on the stand, Selene said. Let's have him testify. Let's bring in independent inspectors to examine the Meridian Tower, the Sapphire Residences, Valencia, all of Mr. Voss's projects. Let's see if the buildings match the documentation. Hutchins pounded his gavel. Order. Everyone sit down. The room reluctantly settled. Damian and Selene both remained standing, locked in a stare that felt like mutual assassination. Ms. Vale, Hutchins said carefully, these are serious accusations. Do you have any proof beyond these documents? I have a whistleblower willing to testify. I have documentation, and I have the buildings themselves, which can be inspected by any qualified structural engineer. If Mr. Voss's projects are as sound as he claims, an inspection will prove that. If they're not, she let the sentence hang. Hutchins looked genuinely distressed now, like a man who'd expected a routine planning meeting and instead walked into a war crimes tribunal. We need to recess, he said. This commission is not equipped to evaluate criminal accusations. We'll refer this matter to the appropriate authorities and reconvene once. No, Vivian said, standing again. With respect, Commissioner, this is directly relevant to the Aurora decision. The question isn't whether Mr. Voss broke the law. That's for prosecutors to determine. The question is whether this commission wants to award a billion-dollar contract to someone with credible accusations of construction fraud hanging over them. Those accusations are not credible, Patricia snapped. They're slander from a vindictive ex-wife who can't accept that her marriage failed. My marriage didn't fail, Selene said quietly. It was destroyed. There's a difference. Damian finally spoke, his voice carrying across the room with the authority of someone used to being obeyed. Commissioners, I've built in this city for 15 years. I've created jobs, generated tax revenue, and delivered projects that other developers said were impossible. Now I'm being attacked by someone who wants to destroy my reputation because she couldn't handle being married to success. He turned to look at Selene. You want to hurt me? Fine. But don't pretend this is about safety or integrity. This is about revenge, and everyone in this room knows it. Selene met his eyes. You're right, she said. I do want to hurt you. But not because you divorced me. Because you lied. Because you stole my work and put your name on it. Because you destroyed my credit and my reputation and tried to erase me from an industry I helped build. And most of all, because you built unsafe housing and put people's lives at risk to maximize profit. Prove it. I intend to. Hutchins pounded the gavel again. We're in recess. Commissioners will reconvene in 1 hour to discuss how to proceed. Everyone else, clear the chamber. People filed out slowly, murmuring to each other, casting looks at Selene and Damian like they were watching gladiators who'd just drawn weapons. Journalists clustered in the hallway, shouting questions that no one answered. Selene made it outside before her legs gave out. She sat on the courthouse steps, head between her knees, trying to remember how to breathe. Marcus sat beside her. That was insane. I know. You just accused Damian Voss of criminal fraud in front of the entire planning commission. I know. We're either heroes or we're finished. I know. Keiko appeared with water bottles. Drink something. You look like you're about to pass out. Selene drank, the cold water shocking her system back to something resembling normal function. Around them, downtown Vegas moved through its daily rhythm. Tourists wandering, delivery trucks rumbling, homeless people pushing shopping carts. The city didn't care that inside that courthouse, someone's empire was maybe, possibly, finally facing consequences. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. I'm going to destroy you so completely you'll beg me to stop. D. She showed the text to Marcus. He's rattled, Marcus said. Or he knows something we don't. Like what? Like maybe those documents aren't as damning as we thought. Like maybe he has explanations for everything. Like maybe I just committed career suicide based on evidence that won't hold up. Stop. Keiko's voice was firm. You saw the inspection dates. You read the emails. That's not ambiguous. That's fraud. Unless it's not. Unless there are explanations we didn't think of. Unless, Selene, Marcus grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. You did the right thing. Even if it destroys us, you did the right thing, because people deserve to know if their homes are safe. Before Selene could respond, Vivienne emerged from the courthouse, her expression unreadable. We need to talk, she said, privately. They walked to a coffee shop 2 blocks away, found a corner booth, waited until they were alone. Vivienne sat very still, her hands folded on the table like she was praying or confessing or both. There's something I didn't tell you, Vivienne said. Celine's stomach dropped. What? James Riley, the whistleblower. He's gone. Gone where? I don't know. He was supposed to meet with my lawyers this morning to prepare his testimony. He never showed up. His phone's disconnected. His apartment's empty. It's like he vanished. The coffee shop felt suddenly too small, too hot, too loud. Did Damian get to him? Marcus asked. I don't know, maybe. Or maybe Riley got scared and ran, or maybe Vivienne stopped. Maybe what? Selene said. Maybe I was wrong about him. Maybe he never intended to testify. Maybe he fed us just enough information to make us confident, knowing we'd present it, knowing we'd stake everything on evidence that wouldn't hold up without his testimony. You're saying it was a setup. I'm saying it's possible. Selene felt like the floor had opened beneath her. She'd just accused Damian Voss of criminal fraud in front of the Planning Commission, media, and half the Vegas development community. She'd staked her entire credibility on documents that required a whistleblower to authenticate them, and that whistleblower had disappeared. Can we use the documents without Riley? Keiko asked. They're less powerful, Vivienne said. Defense lawyers will tear them apart. Where did these come from? Who authenticated them? How do we know they're real? Without Riley to testify that he personally witnessed the fraud, it's just paper, and paper can be explained away. So we lost, Selene said quietly. We haven't lost yet, but we're in trouble. Marcus stood abruptly. I'm calling Rodriguez. Maybe he knows other people who worked on those projects. Maybe we can find someone else to testify. He walked away, phone already at his ear. Selene stared at the table. I'm sorry. For what? Vivienne asked. For trusting your information. For believing this would work. For dragging everyone into this mess. Stop apologizing. You did what needed to be done. And now we're going to lose everything because of it. Maybe. Or maybe something will break our way. Vivienne didn't sound convinced. Either way, you raised questions that needed to be raised. Even if the Planning Commission doesn't act on them, other people will. Journalists, investigators. This doesn't end today. But it might end me today, Selene thought. Her reputation, her career, her one shot at proving Damian hadn't destroyed her. Marcus came back, his face grim. Rodriguez knows 2 other project managers who worked on Damian's builds. Both of them said they'd rather eat glass than testify against him. One of them literally laughed and hung up. So we have nothing, Keiko said. We have the truth, Selene said. That has to count for something. Does it? Marcus's voice was harsh. Because right now it looks like the truth just got us killed. They sat in silence. 3 people and their investor, all of them realizing simultaneously that they'd bet everything on a hand that was weaker than they'd thought. Selene's phone buzzed. This time a blocked number. She almost didn't answer, but something, instinct, desperation, or just morbid curiosity, made her pick up. Hello? Ms. Vale? A woman's voice, young, nervous. My name is Catherine Riley. James is my brother. Selene's pulse spiked. Where is he? He's safe, but he's not coming back to Vegas. He got a call 2 nights ago. Someone threatened him, said if he testified, they'd make sure he never worked again, that they'd go after his family. He has kids, Ms. Vale, a wife. He couldn't risk it. Who threatened him? He didn't know. The caller used a blocked number, but the things they knew, details about his life, his kids' school, his wife's job, it scared him enough to run. Selene closed her eyes. So he's not going to testify? No, I'm sorry. I know that's not what you want to hear. But James asked me to call you because he felt guilty about leaving you hanging. He said to tell you that everything he showed you was real. The documents, the emails, all of it. He just can't be the one to verify it. Then it doesn't matter. Without him, it's just paper. Maybe not. Catherine hesitated. James kept copies, personal copies, stored somewhere Damian doesn't know about. And there are videos. What videos? James filmed some of the construction. Not officially. Just on his phone for personal documentation. He's got footage of the substandard concrete being poured at Meridian Tower. Timestamps showing the dates don't match the official inspection reports. It's not professional documentation, but it's something. Hope flickered in Selene's chest, small and fragile. Can you get me those files? James said he'd send them to a secure server. He'll give you access, but you can't tell anyone where they came from. And if anyone asks, you have to say you found them through your own investigation. I can do that. Give me your email. Selene rattled it off. Catherine repeated it back to confirm, then hung up without saying goodbye. Selene looked up to find Vivienne, Marcus, and Keiko all staring at her. We might have something, she said. She explained quickly the videos, the personal documentation, the fact that James Riley had been scared into running but still wanted to help. Videos can be authenticated, Vivienne said, already pulling out her phone. If the metadata matches the claimed dates, if the footage clearly shows what James says it shows, we can bring in digital forensics experts to testify that it's legitimate. How long will that take? Marcus asked. Days, maybe a week. The commission reconvenes in 45 minutes. Then we stall, Vivienne said. We ask for a continuance, claim we need time to provide additional documentation, buy ourselves a few days to get experts lined up. They rushed back to the courthouse. The hallway was still packed with journalists and observers, all of them looking at Selene like she was either a hero or a lunatic. Hard to tell which. Inside the chamber, the commissioners were already seated. Hutchins looked even more tired than before, like he'd aged 5 years during the recess. We're ready to reconvene, he said. The commission has discussed Miss Vale's accusations, and we've determined that while the concerns she raised are serious, they're outside our jurisdiction. We're referring the documentation to the county prosecutor's office for review. However, that investigation will take time, and we cannot delay the Aurora decision indefinitely. Then what happens? Someone called from the back. We proceed with the selection process. Both proposals will be evaluated on their merits. Mr. Voss's alleged code violations will be investigated separately, but they don't disqualify him from consideration unless formal charges are filed. Selene stood. Commissioner, I'd like to request a continuance. We have additional evidence that's still being compiled, evidence that directly supports the accusations I made earlier. What kind of evidence? Video documentation, timestamps, digital forensics. Hutchins exchanged glances with his fellow commissioners. How much time do you need? 1 week? Absolutely not, Patricia objected. This is another stalling tactic. Ms. Vale makes wild accusations, provides questionable documents, and now wants more time to fabricate additional evidence? This is absurd. The evidence isn't fabricated, Selene said. It's being authenticated by independent experts. Or it doesn't exist, Patricia shot back, which is why you need more time, to create something that looks credible enough to fool people who don't know better. Hutchins rubbed his face. Ms. Vale, do you have this evidence in your possession right now? Not yet. But then the answer is no. We're not delaying this process another week based on evidence you might have. Both proposals stand as presented. The commission will deliberate and announce a decision within 10 business days. He pounded the gavel. We're adjourned. The room erupted again, reporters shouting questions, observers arguing, lawyers conferring in heated whispers. Selene stood frozen at the podium, realizing with awful clarity what had just happened. She'd accused Damian of fraud, but couldn't prove it yet. She'd promised evidence that hadn't arrived in time. She'd thrown everything into one desperate gamble, and the commission had called her bluff. And now, for the next 10 days, she'd wait, while 7 strangers decided whether her career died or survived. Outside, the afternoon sun was brutal. Selene sat on the courthouse steps again, this time too numb to feel much of anything. Vivienne appeared beside her. It's not over. Feels like it is. The videos will still matter. Even if they arrive too late to influence the Aurora decision, they'll support a criminal investigation. Damian could face charges. And I'll be known as the woman who destroyed her ex-husband's career out of spite. Even if I'm right, even if he's guilty, that's the story people will tell. Let them. You'll know the truth. Truth doesn't pay rent. Vivian was quiet for a moment. No, it doesn't, but it lets you sleep at night. Marcus and Keiko joined them, both looking shell-shocked. What now? Keiko asked. Now we wait, Selene said, and hope the commission sees through Damian's bullshit. And if they don't, then we find new careers. They sat together on the courthouse steps as the sun dropped lower, and downtown Vegas transformed from businesslike to predatory. This was the city's real face, the part that emerged after dark, when tourists stopped pretending they were here for anything except indulgence, and locals stopped pretending the city wasn't built on exploitation. Selene's phone buzzed one more time. An email. From an address she didn't recognize. Subject line, "You wanted evidence. Here it is." She opened it. Video files. Dozens of them. Timestamps ranging from 3 years ago to 6 months ago. Metadata intact. And a short note. I can't testify, but maybe this will help. Sorry I couldn't be braver. JR. Selene felt something break loose in her chest. Not quite hope. Not yet. But possibility. She forwarded the files to Vivian. How fast can you get these authenticated? She asked. Vivian was already scrolling through the video thumbnails. 48 hours if I call in every favor I'm owed. Why? Because I have an idea. What idea? A terrible one. Selene stood up, her legs steadier now. One that will either save us or finish destroying what's left of my reputation. I'm listening. The commission has 10 days to decide. That means Damian has 10 days to keep his story straight, keep his allies loyal, keep his empire from crumbling. But what if we don't wait for the commission? What if we take this evidence directly to the media? Force a public conversation about his buildings before the Aurora decision is made. That's incredibly risky, Vivian said. If the videos don't hold up, if experts find problems with the authentication, you'll look like you fabricated evidence. Your credibility will be zero. My credibility is already zero. Damian made sure of that years ago when he told everyone I was unstable. So what do I have to lose? Marcus whistled low. You're talking about going to war in the press. That's scorched earth. I know. If it backfires, none of us will ever work in this city again. I know that too. Then why do it? Selene looked at the 3 people who'd followed her into this impossible fight. The venture capitalist who'd lost her father to developer negligence, the designer who'd stayed despite every rational reason to quit, and the engineer who'd believed in a project bigger than profit. Because someone has to, she said. Because families are living in buildings that might collapse. Because the alternative is watching Damian win again while people suffer. And because if we're going to lose everything anyway, we might as well lose it doing something that matters. Vivian smiled, sharp and cold and absolutely committed. Then let's burn it all down. They went back to the studio and worked through the night. Vivian's digital forensics experts arrived at midnight with equipment that looked like it belonged in a spy movie. They examined every frame of James Riley's videos, checking metadata, analyzing compression artifacts, verifying timestamps against construction permits and weather records. By dawn, they had confirmation. The videos were authentic. By 8 a.m., Selene had written a press release. By 9 a.m., every major news outlet in Vegas had received the videos along with documentation showing that Damian Voss's buildings were constructed using substandard materials and falsified inspections. By 10 a.m., the story exploded. Television stations interrupted regular programming. News websites crashed from traffic. Damian's office line rang continuously with reporters demanding comment. Social media flooded with outrage, speculation, and competing theories about what was really happening. And in a penthouse overlooking the Strip, Damian Voss watched his empire crack like a building constructed on compromised foundations. His phone rang. Investors demanding answers. Lawyers threatening lawsuits. Politicians distancing themselves. One by one, the people who'd propped him up for 15 years started backing away, protecting themselves, letting him fall alone. By noon, 3 major investors had pulled funding from active projects. By 2 p.m., the city building department announced emergency inspections of all Voss developments. By 4 p.m., families were being evacuated from the Meridian Tower as a precautionary measure, while structural engineers examined the concrete. And by sunset, Damian Voss's phone rang one final time. It was the Planning Commission. They were withdrawing his Aurora proposal from consideration. Not because he'd been convicted of anything, not because the accusations had been proven, but because the risk was too great, the optics too terrible, the liability too enormous. He'd lost. Selene watched the news coverage from her studio, surrounded by her team and empty coffee cups, and the exhausted satisfaction of people who'd fought impossible odds and somehow, against everything, managed to land a punch. "We did it," Keiko whispered. "We did something," Selene corrected, "but we haven't won yet." The commission pulled his proposal. How is that not winning? Because pulling his proposal doesn't mean giving us the contract. It just means we're back to competing against whoever else submitted. And trust me, there are at least a dozen other developers who'd love Aurora. Her phone buzzed. Hutchins, the Planning Commission chair. "Ms. Vale, this is Gerald Hutchins. I'm calling to inform you that the Commission has decided to extend deliberations an additional 2 weeks, given the new circumstances surrounding Mr. Voss's proposal. Your submission remains under consideration. We'll contact you when a decision has been reached." He hung up before Selene could respond. 2 more weeks of waiting. 2 more weeks of not knowing whether everything they'd sacrificed would matter. But they'd survived. They'd exposed Damian. They'd proven that speaking up, even when it was terrifying, could actually change something. And somewhere across the city, in buildings she used to design, families were being evacuated to safety because someone had finally held Damian Voss accountable. Selene walked to the studio window and looked out at Vegas. Messy, imperfect, beautiful in its brokenness. "What happens now?" Marcus asked behind her. "Now we wait," Selene said, "and we hope truth matters more than power. And if it doesn't, then at least we tried. And at least people are safe. That's something." Her phone buzzed one final time, another blocked number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Selene Vale," she said, heavy breathing. Then, "You just destroyed my life." Damian's voice was raw, stripped of all its polished confidence. "I hope you're happy." "I'm not happy, but I'm not sorry either. They're inspecting every building I've ever constructed, every project, every deal. They're going to find things, Selene, small things, shortcuts every developer takes, normal business practices, and they're going to crucify me for them because you painted me as a monster." "You are a monster." "No, I'm a businessman. There's a difference. Not when your business puts people's lives at risk." Silence on the line, long enough that Selene thought he'd hung up. Then, "I loved you. Once. Before you decided I was the villain in your story. You became the villain when you destroyed me for asking for a divorce. I protected my business. You protected your ego." More silence. "I'm going to lose everything," Damian said finally. His voice cracked on the last word. "My company. My reputation. Probably my freedom once the prosecutors finish investigating. I'm going to lose everything because you couldn't let go." "No," Selene said quietly. "You're losing everything because you cut corners and lied and hurt people. I just made sure the world finally saw it." She hung up. And for the first time in 6 months, maybe the first time in years, she felt something that wasn't rage or fear or desperate determination. She felt peace. Not victory, not yet, but peace. The kind that comes from knowing you fought for something bigger than revenge. The kind that comes from surviving. Outside her window, Vegas glittered in the twilight. A city built on dreams and desperation, on hope and heartbreak, on people trying to make something from nothing. Just like her. Just like Aurora. And whether the Planning Commission chose her proposal or not, whether she won the contract or lost everything trying, she'd already accomplished something Damian could never take away. She'd proven she was more than his shadow. She'd proven she could stand in the light, and she'd proven that survival, sometimes, looked exactly like standing up when everyone expected you to stay down. The sun dropped below the horizon, the neon blazed to life, and Selene Vale, architect and survivor and warrior, turned back to her team and said the only words that mattered: "Let's get back to work." Because the war wasn't over, but she was still standing, and that, for now, was enough. The 2 weeks felt like drowning in slow motion. Selene stopped sleeping, not intentionally. Her body just refused, her mind racing through scenarios every time she closed her eyes. What if the commission chose another developer? What if Damian's lawyers found a way to discredit the videos? What if families got hurt before the building inspections were complete? The questions circled like vultures, waiting for her to collapse so they could pick her bones clean. She spent 16-hour days at the studio, refining Aurora's design obsessively, changing details that didn't need changing, second-guessing decisions they'd already finalized. Marcus finally took the pencil from her hand on day 9. "Stop," he said. "You're making it worse. It needs to be perfect. It's already perfect. You're just scared." He was right. She was terrified. Not of failing anymore. That fear had calcified into something harder, colder. She was afraid of winning, afraid of the responsibility that would come with Aurora, afraid that she'd finally get everything she'd fought for and discover she wasn't good enough to deserve it. On day 12, the city building department released their preliminary findings on Damian's projects. The Meridian Tower. Concrete mixture fell below code requirements. Structural integrity compromised. Building red-tagged pending extensive repairs. Sapphire residences. Electrical systems installed improperly. Fire hazard. Residents relocated immediately. Valencia complex. Foundation issues. Potential settling problems. Long-term stability uncertain. The report was damning, precise, undeniable. And within hours, criminal charges were filed. Fraud. Reckless endangerment. Bribery of public officials. The prosecutor's office announced the indictment during a press conference that played on every television in Vegas. Damian Voss, the man who'd built half the city's skyline, was facing 20 years in prison. Selene watched the press conference from the studio, her team gathered around the laptop screen. When the prosecutor said criminal negligence, Keiko actually gasped. When they mentioned potential casualties, families who could have died if the buildings had collapsed, Marcus went pale. "We did this," he said quietly. "We actually did this." "No," Rodriguez corrected from the doorway. He'd been showing up every few days, consulting unofficially, helping however he could despite the ethics investigation still hanging over him. "Damian did this. You just made sure he couldn't hide it anymore." But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like watching a building collapse in real time, necessary maybe, but still violent and terrible and impossible to look away from. Selene's phone rang constantly. Journalists wanting interviews, industry observers asking for comment. Other architects who'd been screwed by Damian, calling to say thank you, calling to say they'd always known, calling to share stories of their own encounters with his corruption. She ignored most of them, gave terse no-comment responses to the rest, because talking about Damian meant reliving 5 years of humiliation, and she'd already done enough of that for one lifetime. On day 14, the day before the Planning Commission was supposed to announce their Aurora decision, Vivian called. "We need to meet. Now!" "What happened?" "Just come to my office. Bring your team." They arrived 30 minutes later to find Vivian's conference room packed with people Selene didn't recognize. Lawyers in expensive suits, a woman with a tablet who looked like she'd stepped out of a tech startup, 2 men in their 50s wearing construction company logos on their polo shirts. "Sit," Vivian said. They sat. "The Planning Commission is announcing their decision tomorrow at 10 a.m., Vivian began without preamble. "I have it on good authority that you won." The room seemed to tilt. Selene gripped the edge of the table. "What?" "You won Aurora. The contract is yours." Keiko made a sound between a laugh and a sob. Marcus just stared, mouth open. Selene felt like someone had punched her in the chest and couldn't decide if she should breathe or scream. "But there's a problem," Vivian continued. "Several problems, actually, and we need to solve them in the next 24 hours or winning the contract won't matter." The air went out of the room. "What problems?" Selene asked. Vivian nodded to the woman with the tablet. "This is Sarah Chen, financial analyst." "Sarah?" Sarah stood, pulling up a spreadsheet on the wall screen. Numbers filled the display, red mostly. Lots of red. "Your Aurora proposal was awarded based on design merit and social impact, but the financial backing you listed was contingent on securing the contract. Now that you have it, your investors need to actually commit funds, and several of them have gotten cold feet." "Why?" Marcus demanded. "Because of the Damian situation. They're afraid that being associated with you, with the woman who destroyed Damian Voss, will damage their reputations. They're worried about backlash, boycotts, negative press. So they're pulling out. That's insane, Keiko said. We exposed fraud. We made the city safer. To you, yes. To them, you're a risk. Business is about managing perception, and right now you're perceived as dangerous. Sarah clicked to the next slide. Bottom line, you're short $30 million. If you can't secure funding by the time construction starts, you'll default on the contract, and the commission will award Aurora to the second-place proposal. Selene felt nauseous. Who was second place? Carson Development Group. They design the same luxury bullshit every developer builds. Safe, boring, profitable. Everything Aurora isn't. So we won, Marcus said slowly, but only if we can find $30 million we don't have. Essentially, silence crashed down over the conference room. Selene stared at the red numbers on the screen, feeling like someone had handed her a winning lottery ticket and then immediately lit it on fire. There's more, Vivian said. The construction timeline. You propose breaking ground in 6 months. That's aggressive. Possible, but only if everything goes perfectly. And right now you don't have a project manager. She gestured to the two men in polo shirts. This is Frank Delgado and Robert Kim, both experienced project managers, both interested in Aurora, but they want to meet you first. Make sure you're serious. Of course we're serious, Selene said. Then prove it. Frank Delgado leaned forward. He had the weathered face of someone who'd spent 40 years on construction sites. I've built in Vegas for 30 years. Seen a lot of architects with big dreams and no follow-through. Your Aurora proposal is beautiful, ambitious, maybe too ambitious. So before I attach my name to it, I need to know, are you building this for the right reasons, or is this just revenge architecture? A middle finger to your ex-husband wrapped in sustainable housing? The question hung there like a challenge. Both, Selene said. Delgado blinked. What? It's both. Yes, I wanted to prove Damian wrong. Yes, I wanted to show that I was more than his shadow. But also, yes, I genuinely believe architecture should serve people instead of exploiting them. Yes, I think we can build beautiful things without cutting corners. And yes, I'm willing to work myself to death making sure Aurora succeeds. So if that's not good enough for you, walk away now. But don't question my commitment. Delgado stared at her for a long moment. Then he smiled. Good. I like honest. Honest I can work with. He looked at Robert Kim. You in? Kim nodded. If she is, then we're in, Delgado said to Vivian. But we need to talk contracts, liability, insurance, the whole mess. Later, Vivian said. She turned back to Selene. That solves the management problem. The money problem is harder. I can cover 10 million personally, but that still leaves 20 million short, and we have less than 24 hours to find it. Where? Selene asked. Every investor who was interested already backed out. Then we find new ones. People who aren't afraid of negative press. People who believe in what Aurora represents. Like who? Vivian smiled, sharp and dangerous. Like the families you just saved from living in Damian's death traps. Like the community organizations who've been fighting for affordable housing for decades. Like the small investors who are sick of watching Vegas get gentrified into oblivion. We crowdfund it. Crowdfund $20 million? Marcus sounded incredulous. In one day. Why not? You've got media attention. You've got a compelling story. You've got proof that David can actually beat Goliath if David fights dirty enough. People want to believe in something. Give them something to believe in. It was insane. Impossible. The kind of desperate Hail Mary that only worked in movies and fever dreams. Do it, Selene said. They spent the next 18 hours in a blur of activity that felt more like combat than construction planning. Sarah set up a crowdfunding platform. Vivian's media team crafted a campaign. Marcus and Keiko created visual assets, renderings of Aurora that emphasized community over luxury, humanity over profit. And Selene recorded a video. She sat in front of her laptop in the studio at 2 a.m., exhausted and terrified and completely honest for maybe the first time in her life. My name is Selene Vale, she began. 6 months ago, I was broke, blacklisted, and convinced my career was over. My ex-husband had destroyed my credit, stolen my work, and tried to erase me from an industry I'd helped build. Most people would have given up. I almost did. She paused, gathering herself. But then I discovered that the buildings he'd constructed using my designs were unsafe, that families were living in apartments built with compromised materials, that his empire was founded on fraud, and I realized I had a choice: stay silent and stay safe, or speak up and risk everything. Another pause. Her hands were shaking. She didn't hide it. I chose to speak up, and it cost me almost everything. But it also saved lives. It exposed corruption, and it gave me a chance to build something different, something that actually matters. She held up one of the Aurora renderings. This is Aurora District, mixed income housing, public art spaces, rooftop gardens, architecture designed for people, not profit. The Planning Commission awarded us the contract. But we can't build it without funding, and traditional investors are too scared to back us because exposing fraud apparently makes you unmarketable. She leaned closer to the camera. So I'm asking you directly. If you believe architecture should serve communities instead of exploiting them, invest. If you're tired of watching developers tear down neighborhoods to build luxury condos that stay empty, invest. If you think standing up to corruption matters even when it's terrifying, invest. We need $20 million to make Aurora real. And I know that sounds impossible, but 6 months ago, surviving my ex-husband sounded impossible too, and I did it. So maybe we can do this impossible thing together. She ended the recording and uploaded it without watching it back, because if she watched it, she'd lose her nerve. The campaign went live at 3 a.m. By 4 a.m., they'd raised $50,000. By 6 a.m., $200,000. By 8 a.m., $500,000. Selene watched the numbers climb with a mixture of hope and terror. It was working. People were responding. But $500,000 was nowhere close to $20 million. They needed a miracle. At 8:47 a.m., her phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Ms. Vale, this is Catherine Morrison. I'm on the Planning Commission. Selene's stomach dropped. Commissioner, I'm calling off the record. I saw your video. I cried watching it, and I want you to know that I'm investing $50,000 personally. It's not much compared to what you need, but it's what I can afford, and I'm posting about it on social media, encouraging others. You're investing? In Aurora? In you, in what you represent. I've been on this commission for 8 years. I've watched developers lie and manipulate and build garbage that makes them rich while communities suffer. What you did? Exposing Damian, fighting for Aurora, even when it destroyed you, that took courage I'm not sure I have. The least I can do is put my money where my mouth is. She hung up. Selene stared at her phone, trying to process what had just happened. A planning commissioner had just publicly invested in her project. That would influence others. Give Aurora legitimacy it didn't have before. By 9 a.m., they'd raised $2 million. By 9:30, $5 million. At 9:47, a single investor contributed $3 million with a note. From the residents of Meridian Tower, thank you for saving our lives. Selene started crying and couldn't stop. Marcus handed her tissues. Keiko rubbed her back. Rodriguez, who'd shown up at dawn with coffee and breakfast burritos, sat beside her and said nothing because there was nothing to say. At 9:58 a.m., the crowdfunding platform crashed from traffic. At 10 a.m. exactly, the Planning Commission announced their decision publicly. Aurora District was officially awarded to Vale Architecture. And at 10:03 a.m., when Sarah finally got the platform back online, the total funding raised was $18 million. They were still $2 million short. Selene sat in the studio, surrounded by her team and empty coffee cups, and the impossible reality that they'd come so close only to fall just short of the finish line. We can delay, Vivian said. Push the construction timeline back a few months. Keep fundraising. It's not ideal, but no. Selene's voice was hoarse from crying and exhaustion. If we delay, we lose momentum. Donors will think we're not serious. Investors will back out. We either do this now or we don't do it at all. Then we need $2 million in... Vivian checked her watch. 6 hours. The construction contract requires confirmed funding by end of business today, or we default. Where? Marcus asked. We've tapped every source we can think of. Silence. Then Rodriguez spoke up. I know someone. Maybe. Everyone turned to look at him. Who? Selene asked. Union Pension Fund. They invest in development projects sometimes, large-scale stuff. They're risk-averse, but they also care about jobs and community impact. If we can convince them Aurora's solid, I'll do it, Selene said. How do I reach them? You don't. I do. Rodriguez pulled out his phone. The fund manager owes me favors, a lot of them. I'll call in every single one. But Selene, you need to understand, if I do this, if I publicly attach myself to Aurora, the ethics investigation against me gets worse. It proves I'm still involved. Damian's lawyers will use it to claim the whole team is corrupt. Then don't do it. I'm not asking you to sacrifice. I'm doing it anyway. Rodriguez was already dialing. Because fuck Damian Voss. And fuck anyone who thinks standing up for what's right makes you corrupt. He walked outside to make the call. The team sat in tense silence, waiting. 5 minutes passed. 10. 15. Rodriguez came back inside, his face unreadable. They'll do it, he said quietly. 2 million. Conditional on meeting with you first. Today. 3 p.m. Downtown office. Don't be late. Selene felt like she had been electrocuted. They'll really, but you have to sell it, really sell it. Because pension fund managers don't care about dreams or justice or any of that shit. They care about returns. Prove Aurora will make money, and they're in. Fail to prove it, and we're done. At 2:45 p.m., Selene walked into a downtown office building wearing her only clean suit, a gray thing she'd bought at a thrift store for court appearances that didn't quite fit right, but was professional enough to fake credibility. Marcus and Keiko flanked her like bodyguards. Rodriguez had already gone inside to prep the fund manager. The receptionist directed them to a conference room on the 15th floor. Inside, a man in his 60s sat reviewing paperwork. Gray hair, reading glasses, the kind of face that had probably never smiled in a business context. Ms. Vale, I'm Thomas Webb. Sit. They sat. Webb didn't waste time. Rodriguez vouches for you. That's the only reason you're here. But vouching doesn't mean funding. I've reviewed your Aurora proposal. It's ambitious. Some would say unrealistic. Convince me otherwise. Selene opened her laptop, pulling up the revised financial projections they'd been refining for weeks. Aurora generates revenue 3 ways, she began. Luxury units at market rate, affordable housing subsidized by city grants, and commercial retail space on the ground floors. Total projected annual revenue, $42 million. Construction costs, $308 million. Timeline to profitability, 8 years. Return on investment, 18% over 15 years. Those are projections. Based on what? Comparable developments in Phoenix, Portland, and Austin, cities that have successfully integrated mixed-income housing with commercial space. Vegas isn't Phoenix. No, Vegas is harder. But Vegas also has a housing crisis. Wait lists for affordable units stretch years. Demand is guaranteed. We're not building luxury condos that might stay empty. We're building housing people desperately need. Webb leaned back. Need doesn't equal profit. It does if you structure it correctly. The city grants cover 30% of costs. Tax incentives cover another 15%. Private investment covers the rest. Residents pay rent. Retail tenants pay rent. The building supports itself. And if the market crashes? We have contingencies, variable rent models, flexibility built into leases. We're not leveraged to the point of fragility like most developments. We can weather downturns. Webb stared at her for a long moment. You're asking me to invest pension money, retirement savings for union workers who spent their lives building this city. If Aurora fails, if it turns into another abandoned half-finished development, those people lose their future. That's not a risk I take lightly. I know. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you're a first-time developer with no track record asking for millions of dollars based on idealism and anger at your ex-husband. You're right. Selene felt something harden in her chest. I am angry. I am idealistic. And I have no track record as a lead developer, but I have 15 years of architectural experience. I have a team that includes 2 of the best project managers in Vegas, and I have something most developers don't have. I actually give a damn about the people who live in what I build. That's not a business plan. No, but it's a guarantee. I will not cut corners. I will not compromise safety. I will not build something that exploits people for profit. Because I've seen what happens when developers prioritize money over humanity. I lived with one, married one, watched him destroy lives, and I swore I'd never build that way. So if you invest in Aurora, you're not just investing in a project. You're investing in a commitment that what gets built will actually be worth building. Webb was silent for a long time. Too long. Celine's hands were shaking under the table. Finally, he removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. 2 million, contingent on quarterly financial reviews. First sign of mismanagement and we pull out. Understood? Selene felt the room spin. Understood. Then we have a deal. They shook hands, signed preliminary documents. By 4:30 p.m., the funding was confirmed and transferred. $20 million, secured, real. They'd done it. Outside the building, standing on the sidewalk in afternoon heat that felt like standing too close to a fire, Selene finally let herself exhale. Marcus whooped loud enough to startle passing tourists. Keiko cried openly. Rodriguez just grinned and said, "Told you they'd come through." "We need to celebrate," Marcus said, "properly. Not tacos on a sidewalk. Real food, expensive food, someone else's money paying for expensive food." "Later," Selene said. "First we have to—" Her phone rang. Damian. She should have let it go to voicemail, should have blocked his number weeks ago. But something made her answer. "What do you want?" "To talk. One last time, please." His voice sounded destroyed, raw. Nothing like the confident businessman who'd once commanded rooms with a smile. "There's nothing left to say." "There's everything left to say. Meet me, tonight. The place we used to go. You know the one." She did know. A bar on the edge of downtown, expensive and quiet, where they used to celebrate major deals back when she thought they were partners instead of owner and property. "Why would I do that?" "Because you won. You got everything you wanted. Aurora, vindication, my career destroyed. You won completely. So give me 1 hour to say goodbye to the life we had before you burned it all down." "I didn't burn anything. You did that yourself." "Then let me apologize. Let me—" His voice cracked. "Let me at least try to explain." Selene should have said no. Should have hung up. Should have never looked back at a man who'd tried to erase her from existence. But part of her, the part that still remembered loving him once before she learned better, needed closure. Needed to see him broken. Needed confirmation that fighting back had been worth it. 9 p.m., she said. 1 hour. Then we're done forever. "Thank you." She hung up and immediately regretted it. "Bad idea," Marcus said. "I know. He's going to try to manipulate you." "I know. So why go?" "Because I need to see that he's really finished. I need to know that men like him can actually face consequences. Otherwise, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering if any of this mattered." Marcus looked like he wanted to argue, but didn't. "Want backup?" "No. This is something I have to do alone." At 8:55 p.m., Selene walked into the bar. It looked exactly the same as she remembered. Dim lighting, leather booths, the smell of expensive whiskey and expensive cologne. Damian sat in the back corner, nursing a drink that was mostly ice now. He'd aged 10 years in 2 weeks. His suit hung loose like he'd lost weight. His eyes were hollow. She slid into the booth across from him. "You look terrible," she said. "I feel worse." He tried to smile. It didn't work. "Thank you for coming. You have 1 hour." "I know." He finished his drink in one long swallow. "I'm facing 20 years. My lawyers say I'll probably get 10 to 15 if I take a plea deal. The prosecutors have everything, the videos, the documents, testimony from contractors who are saving themselves by throwing me under the bus. It's over." "Good. Yeah, I guess you'd think that." He signaled the bartender for another drink. "I wanted to tell you something before I go away, before everything ends." "What?" "You were always the talented one, the visionary. I knew it from the moment we met. Every successful project I did, every building that actually mattered, that was you, your designs, your ideas. I just sold them, took credit, built an empire on your back while convincing myself I deserved it." Selene said nothing. What was there to say? "And when you asked for the divorce," Damian continued, "I panicked, because if you left, everyone would eventually realize the truth, that I was just a middleman, a salesman, that you were the real architect. So I destroyed you. Systematically, deliberately. I ruined your credit and your reputation and tried to make sure no one would ever hire you again. Because if you succeeded without me, it would prove I needed you more than you ever needed me. I know, Selene said quietly. I figured that out months ago. I'm sorry. No, you're not. You're just sorry you got caught. Damian flinched like she'd slapped him. Maybe, yeah, maybe that's true. His new drink arrived. He stared at it without drinking. I heard about Aurora, he said. Mixed income housing, public art, community spaces, everything I should have been building if I'd had the courage to put people before profit. You're going to do something genuinely good, something that matters, and I'm proud of you. I know I don't have the right to be proud, but I am. I don't need your pride. I know, but I'm giving it anyway. He finally looked at her directly. I loved you. That was real. Whatever else I did, however much I hurt you, that feeling was real. I just loved money and status more. And by the time I realized what I'd lost, it was too late to get it back. Selene felt something crack in her chest. Not forgiveness, not even pity. Just exhaustion. You could have been different, she said. You could have built things that mattered. Could have used your talent for persuasion to create something beautiful instead of just profitable. But you chose greed every single time. So don't sit there and tell me you loved me, because love doesn't destroy. Love doesn't erase. Love doesn't try to bury people who ask to leave. You're right. I know I am. I just wanted to... He stopped, struggling for words. I wanted to tell you before I go away, before I disappear into whatever comes next. You won, completely, totally, and you deserve to. He stood up, leaving cash on the table to cover both drinks. Goodbye, Selene. He walked toward the exit, got 3 steps away, then stopped and turned back. One more thing. The Valencia complex, the building the city red-tagged. I need you to know... His voice dropped. The foundation problems are worse than the inspectors think. Much worse. The whole structure is compromised. I've known for 2 years. Been paying off inspectors to keep it quiet. But the bribes stopped when the investigation started. And now there are still families living there. About 40 units that weren't evacuated because they're on the upper floors. Selene's blood went cold. How bad? Bad enough that the building could collapse if there's an earthquake or strong wind or... He stopped. I don't know. Maybe nothing happens. Maybe it stands for another 20 years, but maybe it doesn't. And I can't live with that on my conscience, even if I'm going to prison, even if it doesn't matter anymore. Why tell me? Because you're the only person I know who'll actually do something about it. Who'll make noise until those families are safe. I can't fix what I broke. But maybe you can. He left before she could respond. Selene sat alone in the booth, her mind racing. Valencia complex. 40 families, still occupied, structurally compromised. 40 families who could die if the building failed. She pulled out her phone and called Vivian. I need you to do something, Selene said. Right now. Tonight. It's urgent. What happened? The Valencia complex. Damian says it's worse than the inspectors think, that the foundation could collapse. There are still families living there. We need to get them out. Now. How does Damian know? Because he's known for 2 years and did nothing. But he told me tonight, and I believe him, which means we have to move fast. Vivian was quiet for 3 seconds. I'll make calls, get emergency evacuation orders issued. But Selene, this is going to cause chaos. Panic. People will blame the city for not catching it sooner. It'll be a disaster. Better a disaster than a collapse. Agreed. I'm on it. Vivian hung up. Selene sat in the booth staring at nothing, feeling the weight of 40 families on her shoulders. If she was wrong, if Damian had lied just to cause more chaos, she'd look paranoid and reactionary. If she was right and did nothing, people could die. There was no good choice, just the least terrible one. She left the bar and drove to Valencia complex. 20 minutes across the city, arriving at 10:30 p.m. to find the building dark and quiet. Families sleeping, children dreaming, people living their lives inside a structure that might be a ticking time bomb. She called the city building department emergency line. This is Selene Vale. I'm a licensed architect. I have credible information that the Valencia residential complex at 2847 Industrial Road is structurally unsound and requires immediate evacuation. Yes, I know it's late. Yes, I know this will cause problems. I don't care. Get those families out. Now." She hung up and waited. 30 minutes later, emergency vehicles arrived. Fire trucks, police, building inspectors pulled from their beds looking angry and confused. Residents started emerging from apartments, demanding to know what was happening. Selene stood across the street and watched as her phone call set off a cascade of bureaucratic fury that would take all night to resolve. If she was wrong, she'd destroyed her credibility before Aurora even broke ground. If she was right, she'd save 40 families from potential death. She wouldn't know which until morning. At midnight, Marcus called. "I saw the news, Valencia evacuation. That was you?" "Yeah." "Brave or insane?" "Both." "Want company?" "No, just want to make sure I didn't screw everything up." "You didn't. Even if the building's fine, evacuating it out of caution is the right call. Better safe than catastrophic. Tell that to the families sleeping in emergency shelters tonight. They'll understand. Eventually." Selene hoped he was right. At 2 a.m., the building inspectors confirmed it. The Valencia Complex Foundation had stress fractures that hadn't been detected in previous inspections. The structure wasn't in immediate danger of collapse, but it was unstable enough that occupancy was unsafe until extensive repairs were made. Damian had been telling the truth, and Selene had been right to trust him. One last time. She drove home as dawn broke over Vegas, the city transforming from neon nightmare to sun-blasted reality. The Strip emptied out. Hotels changed shifts. The machinery of Vegas kept grinding because Vegas never stopped, never paused, never acknowledged that maybe rest was necessary sometimes. Back at her apartment, she finally crashed, fell onto her mattress fully clothed, and slept for 10 hours straight without dreaming. When she woke up, her phone was full of messages. News outlets wanting interviews, city officials thanking her, residents from Valencia calling her a hero, and one message from Damian, sent at 4 a.m. "Thank you for believing me. Maybe that's worth something." She deleted it without responding, because it didn't matter what it was worth. What mattered was 40 families safe. What mattered was Aurora funded and ready to build. What mattered was proof that speaking up, even when it cost everything, could actually change things. The next morning, Selene stood on the empty lot where Aurora would be built. Marcus, Keiko, Rodriguez, Vivienne, and the new project managers stood with her. Behind them, news crews filmed. Community members gathered. City officials prepared to take credit for supporting a project they'd initially ignored. "This is it," Marcus said. "No going back now." "Good," Selene said. Going back was never the plan. They broke ground at noon with a ceremony that felt too formal, too polished, too much like the kind of empty performance developers loved. But underneath the speeches and photo opportunities, something real was happening. Vale Architecture was building Aurora, and Selene Vale was becoming the architect she'd always been before Damian tried to erase her. As the first shovel broke earth, as the cameras flashed and the crowd applauded, Selene looked out at the city that had almost destroyed her and smiled. Not because the war was over, but because she'd finally stopped fighting Damian's ghost and started building her own future. And whatever came next, success or failure, triumph or disaster, she'd face it as herself. Complete. Unbroken. Free. Construction took 14 months instead of 12. Not because Vale Architecture cut corners or ran into catastrophic problems, but because Selene refused to compromise on anything that mattered. When the rooftop garden steel arrived substandard, she sent it back and waited 3 weeks for replacement materials that met specifications. When a subcontractor tried to use cheaper electrical wiring than the plans called for, she fired them on the spot despite the delay it caused. Every single decision she made prioritized safety and quality over speed and profit. It drove Delgado insane. "You're killing us on timeline, us," he said during a site meeting 6 months in, his voice rough from yelling at contractors all morning. "Every delay costs money. Every replacement order eats into margins. I know you want Aurora perfect, but perfect is the enemy of done." "Done wrong is worse than done late," Selene shot back. She stood in what would eventually become the central courtyard, surrounded by exposed steel beams and concrete dust that turned everything gray. We get one chance at this. One. If Aurora fails structurally, if anything goes wrong because we rushed, it proves every critic right. It proves women can't handle major developments. It proves I was just Damian's bitter ex-wife playing architect. No one thinks that. Everyone thinks that. They're just polite enough not to say it to my face. Delgado was quiet for a moment, watching her. You're right. I'm sorry. We'll do it your way. It's not my way. It's the right way. There's a difference. They did it the right way, and it cost them everything that wasn't nailed down. The budget overruns started small, 5% here, 8% there, but accumulated into a financial crisis by month 9. They'd burned through the $20 million in crowdfunding. The pension fund contribution was exhausted. Vivian's personal investment was gone, and they were still 3 months from completion. Selene sat in the construction trailer at midnight, staring at spreadsheets that all told the same story. They were broke. Completely, utterly out of money. And Aurora was 70% finished, which meant it was both too valuable to abandon and too expensive to complete. Marcus found her there at 1 a.m., head down on the desk, surrounded by financial documents and empty coffee cups. Go home, he said. Can't. Need to find $2 million by Friday, or the contractors walk. How? I have no idea. Marcus sat down across from her. He looked as exhausted as she felt. They all did now, running on fumes and stubbornness, and the desperate belief that they'd come too far to fail now. We could sell equity, he said. Bring in a partner, someone with deep pockets who wants a piece of Aurora. And give up control? Let some investor turn this into exactly the kind of development we were trying to avoid? Better than not finishing at all. He was right. Selene knew he was right. But the thought of surrendering any part of Aurora to outside influence made her physically sick. They'd fought too hard, sacrificed too much, bled themselves dry to build something that actually mattered. Selling equity felt like betrayal. Let me think about it, she said. Yeah, you have 48 hours. After that, we're past the point of saving this. She thought about it for 2 days straight, barely sleeping, running every possible scenario. Take a loan, but they were already leveraged to the breaking point. Cut costs, but there was nothing left to cut without compromising safety. Find new investors. But who would invest in a project already hemorrhaging money? On Thursday afternoon, she called Vivian. I need help, real help, the kind that comes with strings attached. How bad? We're $2 million short. Contractors walk tomorrow if we don't pay them. I'm out of options. Vivian was quiet for a long time. I know someone. Private equity firm. They specialize in distressed projects. But they'll want significant equity. Maybe 30%. Maybe more. What's the catch? Besides giving up a third of Aurora, they'll want oversight, board representation, veto power over major decisions. You'll technically still own Aurora, but you won't control it anymore. It felt like swallowing glass. Set up the meeting. Friday morning, Selene sat in a conference room across from 3 men in identical suits who looked at Aurora's financials the way coroners examined bodies. They asked pointed questions about timeline, budget management, risk assessment. Every answer she gave seemed to confirm their suspicion that Vale Architecture was incompetent. After 45 minutes, the lead partner, a man named Gregory, something with silver hair and dead eyes, leaned back. Your project is underwater, your team is inexperienced, your timeline is unrealistic, and your architect has a history of emotional instability according to industry reports. Those reports were lies spread by my ex-husband, Selene said through clenched teeth. Perhaps, but perception matters more than truth in business, and the perception is that you're a risk. He glanced at his colleagues. We'll invest $2 million in exchange for 45% equity and full financial oversight. 45%, that's non-negotiable. Take it, or watch Aurora die half-finished. Selene looked at Marcus, who'd come as moral support. He gave a tiny shrug that said the decision was hers and hers alone. She thought about everything they'd built, the gardens taking shape on the rooftop, the affordable housing units with windows that actually opened and insulation that worked, the community gallery space where local artists were already booking exhibitions before the building was even finished. All of it would disappear if she didn't take this deal. All of it would be compromised if she did. No, she said. Gregory raised an eyebrow. Excuse me? I said no. I'm not giving you 45%. I'm not letting you gut Aurora's mission to maximize profit. I'd rather let it fail honestly than succeed as something unrecognizable. Then you're a fool. Probably. Selene stood. But I'm a fool who knows what she's building matters more than money, so thank you for your time. We'll find another way. She walked out before Marcus could stop her, before she could second-guess herself, before the crushing weight of what she'd just done could make her turn back. In the parking lot, Marcus caught up to her. That was insane, he said. I know. We're finished. Done. Aurora dies. Maybe. Maybe. There's no maybe. We're out of money and out of time, and you just told our only lifeline to fuck off. Because it wasn't a lifeline. It was a hostage situation. Selene leaned against her car, suddenly too tired to stand on her own. If we'd taken that deal, Aurora would have become just another luxury development with a few token affordable units. Everything we fought for would have been erased. So yeah, I told them no. And yeah, we might lose everything, but at least we'll lose it on our own terms. Marcus stared at her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. You're either the bravest person I've ever met or the dumbest. Both. Definitely both. They drove back to the construction site in separate cars. Selene's phone rang continuously. Vivian, contractors, suppliers, all of them demanding to know what the plan was now that private equity had fallen through. She ignored every call. Didn't have answers. Didn't have options. Just had the hollow certainty that she'd done the right thing, even though the right thing was going to destroy them. At the site, she found Keiko standing in the unfinished lobby, staring up at the exposed ceiling where the public art installation would eventually hang. I heard, Keiko said quietly, about the equity deal, about you walking away. News travels fast. Are we really done? Unless a miracle happens, yeah. We're done. Keiko nodded slowly. Then I'm glad we at least got this far. Most people never even try. We tried. That counts for something. It should have been comforting. Instead, it felt like a eulogy. Selene walked through Aurora alone after everyone left for the day. 70% complete. So close to something beautiful. So close to proving that architecture could serve people instead of exploiting them. But close didn't matter. Close didn't pay contractors or finish buildings or change anything. She sat on the concrete floor of what would eventually be the community gallery and let herself cry for the first time in months. Not angry tears, not desperate tears, just exhausted, grief-stricken tears for something that had almost existed. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Hello? Ms. Vale? This is Catherine Morrison from the Planning Commission, and also one of your crowdfunding investors. Commissioner, this isn't a great time. I heard Aurora's in trouble. Financial problems. Is that true? Yes. How much do you need? Selene laughed bitterly. $2 million, which I don't have, which no one will give me. So Aurora dies and I become a cautionary tale about architects who dream too big. What if I told you there might be another way? I'd say I've heard that before, and it always comes with strings that strangle you. No strings, just people. Lots of them. Small amounts each. I posted about Aurora's financial crisis on social media. Explained that the project was almost finished but needed final funding. And people responded. Teachers, nurses, construction workers, retirees, people who care about what Aurora represents. They're offering money. $10, $50, $100. None of them can afford much, but together, Catherine's voice caught with something that sounded like hope. Together it might be enough. Selene's breath stopped. How much have they raised? $400,000 in 6 hours. That's not nearly enough. Not yet, but it's growing. And I think if you asked directly, if you explained what's at stake, more people would help. The first crowdfunding campaign succeeded because people believed in your story. This one will succeed because people believe in Aurora, in what it represents. In the idea that maybe, just maybe, we can build things that prioritize humanity over profit. Selene closed her eyes. I don't know if I can ask for help again. Last time almost killed me. Then don't ask for yourself. Ask for Aurora. Ask for every family who'll live here. Ask for every artist who'll show work in the gallery. Ask for the future this building represents. And if it fails, if people contribute and we still can't raise enough, then at least you'll know you tried everything. But Selene? I don't think it'll fail. I think people are tired of watching developers destroy communities. I think they want to believe something better is possible. Give them that chance. Catherine hung up. Selene sat in the empty gallery space for a long time, holding her phone, feeling the weight of impossible hope pressing against her chest. Finally, she stood up, walked outside, set up her phone camera in the golden hour light that made even unfinished construction look beautiful, and she recorded another video. "My name is Selene Vale," she began. Her voice was raw, stripped of polish or performance. 14 months ago, I asked you to help fund Aurora District, and you did. $20 million from thousands of people who believed architecture could serve communities instead of exploiting them. You gave us a chance, and we've spent every day since then trying to honor that trust. She turned the camera to show Aurora behind her, steel and concrete, and dreams taking shape. But we're in trouble. We're $2 million short of completion. We've done everything right. No corners cut. No safety compromised. No workers exploited. But doing things right costs more than doing things fast. And now we're out of money with 3 months left to finish. She turned the camera back to herself. I could take money from private equity. They'd give me what I need, but they'd also take control, turn Aurora into exactly the kind of development we were trying to avoid. So I said no, which means Aurora either dies or survives because people like you, people who care more about communities than profit, decide it's worth saving. Selene took a breath. I'm not going to lie and say every dollar matters or that your contribution will change the world. But I will say this. Aurora represents something rare. Proof that buildings can prioritize people over profit and still succeed. If it dies, it proves the cynic's right. It proves greed always wins. But if it survives, if we finish this together, it proves something better is possible. She ended the recording and uploaded it without watching it back. Within an hour, the total raise jumped to 700,000. By midnight, 1.2 million. By dawn, 1.8 million. Selene watched the numbers climb from the construction trailer, Marcus and Keiko flanking her like honor guard, all three of them too afraid to hope out loud. At 9 a.m. Saturday morning, they crossed $2 million. At 9:47 a.m., they hit 2.5 million, $500,000 more than they'd needed, enough to cover unexpected costs and finish Aurora without compromise. Selene started crying and couldn't stop. Not sad tears anymore. Not exhausted tears. Just overwhelming gratitude that thousands of strangers had believed in something enough to save it. We did it, Marcus whispered. Holy shit, we actually did it. No, Selene said. They did it. We just gave them something worth saving. Construction resumed Monday morning. Contractors returned. Suppliers delivered materials. The machinery of building started grinding again after a weekend of terrifying uncertainty. And 3 months later, on a Thursday afternoon in late autumn, when the desert heat finally broke and Vegas remembered it could breathe, Aurora opened. The ceremony was massive. City officials gave speeches. Media covered it like a cultural event instead of just another development. Families who'd contributed $10 stood next to families who'd contributed $10,000, all of them celebrating the fact that they'd collectively built something impossible. Selene stood at the center of the courtyard, now complete with gardens and art installations and benches where people already sat reading, and felt like she was dreaming. Marcus approached, carrying 2 beers. Thought you might need this. I don't drink during business hours. It's 6 p.m., and you just finished building a $300 million development through sheer stubbornness. I think you've earned a beer. She took it. They drank in silence, watching families explore their new homes, artists setting up pieces in the gallery, community members discovering the public spaces that had been designed specifically for gathering instead of consuming. Do you think it'll last? Marcus asked. All of this. Or will it eventually turn into just another luxury building? I don't know. Maybe. Probably. Everything gets corrupted eventually. Selene took another sip. But for now, for today, it's exactly what we wanted it to be, and that's enough. Rodriguez appeared, no longer under ethics investigation after the union dropped all charges following Damian's conviction. He'd officially joined Vale Architecture as senior project manager, bringing 28 years of experience and a network of contacts that would carry them through the next decade of work. The affordable housing units are fully leased, he said. Waitlist stretches into next year. We could build 3 more Auroras and still not meet demand. Then maybe we should, Selene said. You serious? Why not? We know how to do it now. We've got a team, we've got proof of concept, we've got community support. So yeah, let's build more. Rodriguez grinned. You're insane. I love it. As the celebration continued around her, Selene slipped away, walked to the edge of the construction site where the chain link fence still stood, marking the boundary between what Aurora was and what the neighborhood had been. A figure stood outside the fence, watching the celebration from a distance. Damian. He looked smaller than she remembered, thinner, older. He wore an orange jumpsuit with Doc stenciled across the back, Department of Corrections. A guard stood 10 feet away, giving him space but watching carefully. They let you out for this? Selene asked. 3-hour supervised release. Good behavior. Damian's smile was self-deprecating. I asked to come. Told them I needed to see what real architecture looks like. You're allowed to be bitter. I destroyed your life. No, I destroyed my life. You just documented it. He gestured toward Aurora. This is beautiful. Everything I should have built. Could have built if I'd cared about anything beyond profit. Why are you really here? Damian was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. Because I needed to see that you survived. That you became the architect you always were before I tried to erase you. I needed confirmation that destroying you didn't work. That you were stronger than my worst impulses. That's a lot to need. Yeah, probably selfish. But I'm working on being honest now. Therapy in prison. Court ordered. He laughed bitterly. Turns out when you're facing 10 years, you finally have time to confront your demons. Selene looked at this man she'd once loved, once trusted, once built a life with before learning he was hollow underneath the polish. And she felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, not even pity. Just the distant acknowledgement that he was another human who'd made terrible choices and was facing consequences. I forgive you, she said quietly. Damian's head snapped up. What? I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, not because what you did was forgivable, but because I deserve to stop carrying your shit around. I deserve to be free. I don't, his voice broke. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know. That's why it's mine to give, not yours to earn. Take it or don't. I don't care. Either way, I'm done letting you live rent-free in my head. The guard checked his watch. Time, Voss. Damian nodded, started to walk away, then stopped and turned back one final time. For what it's worth, he said, you were always the talented one. I just had the confidence to pretend otherwise. But everyone who mattered knew the truth. They knew you built my empire. They knew I was just the salesman, and now everyone knows you can build your own. He walked away, climbing into the prison transport van, disappearing back into the consequences of his choices. Selene watched him go and felt the last knot of anger in her chest finally loosen and dissolve. She turned back toward Aurora, where the celebration was reaching its peak. Music playing, food being served, families laughing in spaces designed for exactly this kind of joy. She walked back into the courtyard and found her team clustered near the gallery entrance. There you are, Vivian said. I was about to send a search party. Sorry, got distracted. By what? Closure. Vivian studied her face. Damian? Yeah. What did he want? To say goodbye. To see what real architecture looks like. To make peace with himself, maybe. And did you make peace with him? Selene thought about it. No, but I made peace with myself, which is better. As the sun dropped toward the horizon and the celebration transformed from formal ceremony to genuine party, Selene found herself standing at the center of Aurora's courtyard, surrounded by everything she'd fought for. The gardens climbing toward the sky, green and alive against steel and glass. The gallery walls covered in art from local creators who finally had space to display their work. The families moving through their new homes with the careful wonder of people who didn't quite believe good things could happen to them. And in the distance, the Vegas skyline, neon and excess and impossible dreams stacked vertically, the city that had tried to destroy her and failed. Keiko approached with her phone. The architecture magazines are calling, 3 of them. They want profiles, feature stories. Apparently Aurora's getting attention. Good attention or controversial attention? Both. Some people love it, think it's revolutionary. Others say it's naive, that it'll fail financially, that we got lucky and can't replicate it. What do you think? Keiko smiled. I think we built something that matters. And whether it succeeds or fails, whether we replicate it or not, we proved it was possible. That's more than most architects ever accomplish. Yeah, Selene said. It is. Night fell over Vegas and Aurora's courtyard lights activated, soft, warm, designed to invite gathering instead of advertise consumption. People stayed late, reluctant to leave, wanting to extend this moment of collective achievement as long as possible. Around midnight, the crowd finally thinned. The caterers packed up. The city officials left in their expensive cars. The media departed to file stories about the architect who'd risen from her ex-husband's ashes to build something that mattered, and eventually only Selene's core team remained. Marcus, Keiko, Rodriguez, and Vivienne. The people who'd fought beside her through every impossible challenge, every setback, every moment when quitting seemed easier than continuing. We should make a toast, Marcus said. Something profound and meaningful. To not giving up when we should have, Keiko offered. To being too stubborn to know when we were beaten, Rodriguez suggested. To building something worth building, Vivienne said quietly, even when everyone said it was impossible. They raised their drinks, beer and champagne and someone's flask of whiskey, and clinked glasses in the warm desert night. To Aurora, Selene said, and to every person who believed it was worth saving. To Aurora, they echoed. They drank and sat, and talked about nothing important because for once they didn't have to solve crises or fight battles or prove they deserved to exist. For once, they could just be people who'd accomplished something difficult and were allowing themselves to feel proud. Around 2 a.m., they finally dispersed, exhausted, satisfied, already thinking about the next project, the next fight, the next impossible thing they'd attempt. Selene stayed behind, walking through Aurora one final time before going home. She ran her hands along walls she'd designed, stood in courtyards she'd imagined, looked up at gardens she'd fought to make real. And she thought about the woman she'd been 18 months ago, broken, furious, convinced she'd never recover from what Damian had done. That woman had survived by becoming someone different, someone harder, someone who understood that survival sometimes meant fighting wars you never wanted and making enemies of people you once loved. But she'd also become someone who knew her own worth, who understood that talent mattered more than charm, integrity mattered more than profit, and standing up for what was right mattered more than playing it safe. Aurora wasn't just a building. It was proof of transformation. It was evidence that destruction could be survived and used as foundation for something better. It was a monument not to revenge, but to resilience. Selene's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Saw the coverage of Aurora. It's beautiful. You did what I never could, built something that actually matters. Congratulations. You earned this. D. She read it twice, then deleted it. Because Damian's approval, his acknowledgement, his pride, none of it mattered anymore. She'd stopped building for his validation or anyone else's the moment she'd started building for herself. She walked out of Aurora into the Vegas night, the city glittering around her like broken glass reassembled into something that almost looked like hope. Her car was parked 2 blocks away. She walked slowly, savoring the cool air, the quiet streets, the strange peace that came from finally finishing something that had nearly killed her to create. Tomorrow, there would be more work, more challenges, more battles against developers who cut corners, and officials who prioritized profit, and investors who couldn't understand why anyone would choose integrity over easy money. But tonight she was just Selene Vale, architect and survivor, walking through a city that had tried to erase her and failed. And overhead, the stars were invisible behind city lights and desert haze, but she knew they were there anyway, just like she'd always been there, even when Damian tried to make her disappear. Present, persistent, undefeated. She drove home to her apartment, no longer the Henderson dump, but a modest place in Summerlin with actual furniture and a kitchen that worked, and slept dreamlessly for the first time in 18 months. And when she woke the next morning to sunlight streaming through windows and her phone already buzzing with new projects, new opportunities, new chances to build things that mattered, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not happiness exactly, not triumph, just the quiet certainty that she'd survived the worst thing that could happen to her and emerged on the other side still herself. Still standing, still building, still fighting for a version of architecture that prioritized humanity over exploitation. And in a city built on gambling and impossible odds, that was the biggest victory of all. Not destroying the man who'd tried to destroy her, but becoming someone he could never touch again. Someone who'd learned that survival looked like standing up when everyone expected you to stay down. Someone who understood that revenge was temporary, but creation was permanent. Someone who'd built Aurora not despite Damian Voss, but because of what she'd learned by surviving him. The skyline glowed beyond her window, Vegas in daylight, stripped of its neon disguise, honest in its brokenness, and beautiful because of it. Just like her. Just like Aurora. Just like every person who'd ever been destroyed and found a way to rebuild themselves into something stronger than before. Selene Vale stood at her window and smiled at the city that had tried to break her. And the city, indifferent and magnificent, kept spinning, because Vegas never stopped. And neither did she.